Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In the absence of Chairman Harris, I will begin the meeting until he gets here. Jay, you'll be seated today, even when Brian shows up. Yes, ma'am.
If the commission or the agency would please make a motion to add the minutes from our special meeting of 10/20/15 to item 2.
Use to add minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, I sat Jay, who stays seated, even though you're here. No, there's 7 of us.
Now, the coup is suspended.
Coup is suspended. Big rock.
Right. Can we have a review of the draft minutes while Brian gets his stuff together?
Yeah.
Are there any comments on the minutes from the last meeting? No comments? Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second? All in favor? So moved. Madam Director, if you could have your report, please.
Good evening. So the flow of applications, you can see we've been fairly consistent each month with the number that we have received by the time we get to the agency. It's about 4 days before the meeting, we might have 1 or 2, and then we get slammed those last 3 days. So the number of applications is holding steady. In our last month, there was an increase, a small increase in the green sheet as compared to last month, but then the month before, we're still lighter than that. So I don't know if that's an indication that we'll slow down a bit coming into the final months of the year. We'll see. Our number of site inspections fell appreciably, which is a concern to all of us. And we discussed that in our last site or staff meeting and feel that it's probably appropriate to set some goals among staff to make sure we keep our compliance number of inspections up and other inspections. So we didn't have a particular cause where there was a lot of vacations or a higher number of particularly troubled applications or issues that consumed an inordinate amount of time. So it was probably a fair amount of small things that amounted to a lowering of inspections. But we will be sure that that is increased by this time next month. As you are all aware, we had our meeting on the 20th, and I thank you all for attending. Very pleased that everybody made the time to give up a valuable weeknight evening to go over the agency's procedures. I know for myself it was quite beneficial, and I think Bob is in agreement that we learned a fair amount from you folks as to what you want to see and how we can help serve you better. We right out of the gates, which was terrific. Bill sent an email, wanted to go on a site walk, and then Norma and Jay joined in, which was fabulous. We got to see a good number of sites on a beautiful Friday afternoon. And it also gave us an opportunity to talk about some other procedures and how we as staff can change things or present things in a different way that might be more helpful to the agency members. One was a suggestion to simplify the staff reports, that there's an awful lot of information that we as staff look towards, but you as agency members perhaps are not in need of. So at the very least, simplifying the documents so that you get a clear, concise description of what's going on and what staff is thinking as far as deficiencies, additional information, and the like. So we will troubleshoot that among ourselves and bring some redos to the agencies in the future. And as always, it's an ongoing dialogue. There is nothing set in stone when it comes to staff reports. They are meant to serve you guys, so we want to be sure that they do their job. Then public outreach and education. We have the Ripple Bioassessment by Volunteers, which is a project that the agency staff have conducted in the past. Doreen, has Daniel done it in the past too, or is this his first year? Doreen and Daniel, and this is a program that's done in connection with the Conservation Commission, so it's a nice partnered project among departments, which is terrific. For us, it gives the opportunity to get out into the public the concept of that stream have health or lack of health. So it should give a good opportunity to get some press releases for the people in town to think about their stream as a living resource and understand that their actions do impact the health of that resource. So I think that about covers it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Very good.
Thank you, Pat. And again, thank you for organizing that meeting last week. It was very beneficial to all of us. We appreciate that. I think our goal is to do those quarterly in the future. Okay, compliance report. Doreen.
Are we going to touch on agent approvals? That was
No,
first.
That actually gets rolled
Okay.
into the last part of the agenda.
Got it.
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
so-
sorry, I've got,
We changed the agendas around.
okay, I've got one with agent approvals and one without. Okay. So, any questions on agent approvals? Oh, okay. Compliance report.
Okay. All right, so I did a total of 18 reviews for permit files for bond releases. 10 of these were initiated by staff. 8 of them were requested by the permittees. We were able to release 10. As the director already touched on, we had a total of 63 inspections, compliance inspections in October. Going forward, we're going to revamp that system so that we can better distribute field inspections between the staff members so that ultimately we can bring our numbers up there. For deadlines passed, the majority of the deadlines have been completed. One of them, 6 Meadowcroft Lane, they were meant to install plantings and remove debris by a deadline of October 15th. This was not completed, so as conditioned in their permit that was issued by the agency in August, they will be issued a certificate of violation that will be placed on the land records. We had 2 stop work orders this month. 34 Quail Road is going to be discussed under violations, as is 78 Zacchaeus Mead Lane, which was rather significant. You'll hear more about that in the violation section. For deadlines that are upcoming, we had some that didn't quite get moved up. October 23rd deadline, we had 2 Hunsinger Drive. We needed an application, which was received. We had an additional filing fee for 12 Burning Tree that was paid. 6 Dunwoody Place, they needed to submit an application. We have been in contact with the homeowner. They haven't submitted their application just yet, but as conditioned by the agency, certificate of violation will be placed on the land record for missing that deadline. And then we also received our application for 723 Lake Avenue. That completes the compliance summary.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. It's 7:15, but we will continue on with the public session. First we have is a public hearing, call to public hearing.
Do we need a motion to open the public hearing?
Okay.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Yes, so moved. Okay.
All right. Directors asked me to read into the record the relevant documents that have been distributed to the agency and to other required reporting, other reporting requirements. We distributed a proposed revised regulation draft dated September 3rd, 2015, with accompanying explanatory notes to the Department of Environmental Protection, Energy and Environmental Protection on September 3rd, the day of the printing of the draft. We did get confirmation this is all September. September 3rd, we notified Deep. September 4th, Deep acknowledged they'd received the draft with the explanatory notes. October 2nd, the draft, the explanatory notes, and a copy of the 4th edition of the Deep model regulations was sent to the agency. So you all have had this for a little less than a month. The public legal notice was printed twice in the Greenwich Time. The first time was on October 13th. Second was October 22nd, in order to comply with the noticing requirements of the regulations. And the final document of note is an email from Elliot Benton to staff and the agency with his suggested changes to paragraph 11.2. We printed a copy of this out and distributed it to you this evening. I guess the only other thing I'd note is that this process began last spring, late winter actually, and so a subcommittee of the agency has worked on it between that time and the time of the distribution of these September 3rd, 2015 final draft regulations. So I guess having summarized that, turn it over to the director or to the agency for your discussion and hopefully approval of these revisions.
Thank you, Bob. Pat, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, all of my concerns and comments have been incorporated throughout the process, so I'm satisfied with them. And the suggested language that Ellie submitted, I think is fine and goes a long way to clarifying that section.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agency questions or comments on the proposed regulations? Are there any questions regarding Elliot's email today? I'm sorry, Bill. Yes.
Go ahead.
No, it was just a monumental task to do this. I was just staggered when I saw the first submission that Bob sent around to us with documents going back in time, and he incorporated everything, and he really, he did a wonderful job, as did Patricia when she came on board, but really a phenomenal job.
That's well done.
I just have one editorial suggestion. In section 5, each of the first 4 items on page 15, they all begin with the identical language. The Commissioner of Energy and Environmental Protection shall have exclusive jurisdiction over, and after that, the language changes. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to just have a heading that just has that language with a colon and then says 5.1 regulated activities, 5.2 tidal wetlands, 5.3 activities authorized under, etc.
Okay.
Not a big idea. Just thought it would simplify it.
So how would you propose the lead-in sentence on that, Bill?
I would just have a sentence right above the current section 5.1,
Okay,
which says, probably in bold, upper and lower case, the Commissioner of Energy and Environmental Protection shall have exclusive jurisdiction over, colon, and
Okay.
then it would say regulated activities. Each one of those would be parallel structure.
okay, very good. All right, are there any other agency comments or
Well,
questions?
I would make a comment on Bill's suggestion.
Okay,
To be consistent with the layout of the rest of the regulations, that would have to be section 5.1. The Commissioner of Energy and Environmental shall have exclusive jurisdiction over A, B, C, and D, because none of the other sections have a lead-in paragraph before the first number.
okay.
But I think it's a good idea.
developed?
Yeah, but is that in other words, there are no other sections that begin with any particular reference that's repeated?
Not that
Well, I mean, I think that would work. I mean, in the sense of probably just have section 5.1, A, B, C, D,
Right.
rather than
Yeah.
5.1 through
Okay.
4.
Fine.
Very good.
Track, section 22A39.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Any other agency questions or modifications? Is there any public questions or comments on the posted regulations? No?
I have a question.
Yes.
For Pat, or, thank you. Question for Pat. I assume legal departments looked at this, and the relevant other town departments have looked at it?
I'll defer to Bob on how this was circulated through the other towns. Yes, legal has had a look at it, and it goes up to DEP.
Yeah.
So they make sure it's consistent with the state statutes as they understand them, and make sure we're not running amok anywhere.
Okay.
So far,
I know.
we're looking good.
Does anything happen after we approve it?
I believe we have to file that back with the DEP, a notice,
That it's
the legal
approved.
notice saying that they were approved. So we'll set a date for which they'll be effective and convey that to the state.
Gotcha.
Okay, very good.
I would say that they would be effective tonight if they're approved. And they get sent to the state within 10 days.
Very good. Okay,
I missed that. They're effective tonight without state approval?
The state's not going to approve them. They're
Just-
going to review them if by chance they happen to catch something,
For conformity?
they would have let us know, and we haven't heard anything of that nature from them.
okay. With that, I'll propose a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve and accept the amendments to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse regulations as proposed, with the addition of, or with the modification of section 11.2 to be consistent with the email from Mr. Benton dated October 21, 2015, and the suggested modification of language in section 5.1 by Bill Galvin. Is there a second?
Second,
Elliot Benton seconds. All in favor? Okay, so moved.
move to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, very good. Okay, on to applications. We have 3 consent approvals today. Application 2012-136, 21 Flagler Drive, Redness and Mead Incorporated, for 21 Flagler LLC, for installation of a well water treatment backwash infiltration system approximately 60 feet from a wetland. The second is application 2015-140, 2 Highview Avenue LLC, for construction of a new single-family residence 80 feet from pool, 33 from, and fence 10 feet from wetlands. And thirdly, application 2015-146, 1 Renwood Manor, Steve Wall, for installation of a fence. Are there any questions on the consent approvals? No? Any public comments? No. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Very good. Okay, on to pending applications. Our first is 2015. Mr. Frangione, I think, is still in the hallway. But 2015-084, 12 Ballwood Road, Frangione Engineering LLC, for AMG Properties LLC, for demolition and construction of a new single-family residence.
She's going again.
Okay. Okay. Pat?
Okay. Members should have received in your packet last Thursday new information with regards to this project, a revised site plan, a revised planting plan, and then a discussion of alternatives, and then a sunshade analysis. All of these items were requested previously of the applicant, and I'm happy to have them submitted. So, where's my clicker? This is a tough map. So in previous discussions of this application, there was a cottage on the property that was to remain, and the application has been revised to remove that cottage. The deck in the south end of the house was previously midway up the footprint and has now been pushed further back, providing some more, from better separating distance from the wetland to the house. The footprint of the house itself has been reduced by 327 feet, which increases the setback of the house from the wetland from 22 feet to 30 feet. Those are all movement in the direction that the agency was hoping for. The advantage to those movements allows the buffer, which had been a uniform 5 feet of meadow off the boundary of the wetland, has now been expanded where the site use allows. So you have a buffer which is considerably wider up towards the front of the house. Out the side of the more active portion of the house, the buffer reduces down to, I believe it's 10 feet. And then now that the cottage is gone, the buffer increases, pushes out again. As I indicated in the packet, there are alternatives discussed by the engineer. The agency and DPW and staff have been urging the applicant to look at alternatives that reduce the length of the driveway. The thought was that if the garage was pulled to the north end of the house, then the driveway could in fact be much shorter. In going through the alternatives, the applicant has demonstrated that the square footage of the driveway, in fact, is not a savings as they have configured it, which would be parking up front for guest vehicles, then coming into the garage with the background associated with getting your vehicles out of the garage and then leaving the site face forward. That square footage of driveway, it was equal, if not worse, than having this long stretch of pervious pavement. Another conflict was this infiltrator system. If you recall, a couple meetings back, we had a discussion and actually concerns with regards to the separation of the bottom of that system from high groundwater. So we know that it is bumped up in order to maintain that separating distance. That fill actually is now an impediment to maintaining the proper grades associated with the driveway. Effectively, the driveway would have to drive up and over a hump to access the house, which apparently does not work so well. The planting plan associated with the buffer, you would have in your packet as well. Doreen, do we have Bill Kenny's planting plan? Thank you. So again, this is an illustration of the expanded buffer in areas where the residents don't need to use the land, being the north and south ends of the property, and with the elimination of the cottage, additional area is available for planting and protecting the wetland to a greater extent. Also today, received an email from Ann Stoley. Is Ann here this evening? No. In summary, Ms. Stoley lists a fair number of issues associated with the Baldwood neighborhood, lighthouse, and ledge, consistent with the concerns that we have heard from the public over the course of this application review, namely is those neighborhoods are subject to flooding, and their concern remains high with regards to the flooding potential that this development could bring. And there was a emphasis that this applicant should be cleaning out more than just the watercourse on site, which is proposed as part of the application. But in fact, the applicant should be looking to areas on town property next door, catch basins, and the like. I did forward this email to our Department of Public Works as well as the applicant's team so that they were aware of the concerns, and perhaps they'll speak to it, perhaps not. I did hear back from Mr. Marucci of DPW, who said that the items on here outside of the premises of 12 Ballwood would not be the responsibility of the applicant, but instead would be the responsibility of the town. And the prudent course of action would be to set up a meeting with the engineering department, Amy Siebert, the commissioner of DPW, and start to work on the issues from a whole perspective. And in fact, it's not the responsibility of this applicant to take that on. I believe that summarizes. With the additional information submitted by the applicant, I feel comfortable that the feasible and prudent alternatives have been investigated, and there's been adequate demonstration why, for prudent engineering and feasibility reasons, other configurations of the driveway do not work, that the increased buffer and protection of the wetland is in fact a more balanced use of the property than previously submitted. And I would recommend approval with the special conditions listed in the staff report and the standard conditions that are our norm.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency. For the record, John Hegney. We've reviewed Director Sesto's report. We agree with her findings. We are comfortable with the conditions, and we would ask for your approval.
Okay. Are there any agency questions for Mr. Hegney regarding this application as presented tonight? No? Okay, thank you. Are there any public questions or comments on this application? Okay, please come forward.
Good evening, Mary Young. You've seen me at the prior meetings. I represent my family's interest at 11 Ledge Road, down gradient from the subject property. For the record, I want to thank Mr. Pelicano, the applicant, and his consulting team for the revisions that you have itemized this evening. We've come a long way since it started in July. I thank the agency members for encouraging that kind of coordinated effort between your director and the applicant to get us to a place where everyone is recommending approval. I would ask, as I've already asked the applicant, for consideration on special condition number 11 of Pat Sesto's October 20th report, where she recommends as a special condition that the maintenance be certified every 5 years of the stormwater management system. As you've heard on the record, there's a lot of concern in the neighborhood about that stormwater management system, and this project is contingent upon that system working well, and therefore my condition is a request for modification to special condition number 11 to make that an annual certification rather than 5 years. A lot of harm can get done in 5 years that perhaps the applicant would have to spend more money fixing after 5 years than if they knew about a concern after 1 year. I'm confident if Mr. Pelicano was the homeowner that he would be very on top of this, but unfortunately he is a developer. He will not be the resident of this property, so I'm concerned about the future owner taking on that responsibility as well as Mr. Pelicano would if he were residing there. Again, I mentioned this concern of mine to Mr. Pelicano that we make that an annual certification report rather than every 5 years, and I imagine he'll tell you if he finds that acceptable. That would be my only additional recommendation beyond Ms. Sesto's special conditions, and I'm once again very grateful to her, to Bob, and to all of you for your consideration of all the neighbors' concerns during this process. Thank you.
We can wait for the remaining public comments. We had heard that that might be an issue that the neighbors were interested in. We would ask that we not receive a different treatment from any other property in town that has the 5-year requirement. These drainage maintenance declarations have been recorded all over town. We think 5 years is standard and fair, and we would ask for similar treatment.
Steve,
Yeah, I have one comment on that. Under Special Condition 5, okay, you are to provide a packet describing components of the stormwater management system, practical means to maintain them, including that a recommendation to do it annually.
I understand that there are neighbors in the neighborhood that are interested in this. I think that while it's certainly something we would consider, I would prefer that we receive the same treatment as every other property owner in town.
If I may, so the 5-year has to do with having a professional do the inspection, which is different than annual maintenance on the system. So
Excuse me.
you are going to have annual maintenance.
Of course, and I'm sure the property owner would be the first one to agree to that.
I was just suggesting you make sure it's in the packet that you give to the prospective owner.
We'll make sure of
Certainly.
that as well.
Thank you.
It is part of the title report that any prospective buyer would receive.
So how would you feel about if 11 was modified to say for the first 2 years and then switch it to a 5-year schedule? The reason being that, obviously you'd like to make sure that this thing works, and if you had a period of a year or something like that, and you had some rainstorms, people could check it and have a degree of comfort that in fact the system is working. Would that be acceptable?
We have our engineer, Rob Frangione, here this evening who can maybe better address that. But my first thought would be that during the early years of a drainage system, that maintenance wouldn't be required as much as later on.
Yeah,
But I'll
it's
let
more- it's
Rob
more
speak
of-
with that.
Not the maintenance so much as the efficacy of the
Absolutely.
system.
And Rob Frangione.
For the record, Rob Frangione, it's no problem. We can make that as a condition for the first 2 years that a PE inspect annually, and then from there thenceforth every 5 years.
So wait, just to make clear, when you say inspect, would that mean that if a significant rainstorm was coming, the guy would go down there and kind of?
Well, no, as
Or the
part
thing
of the
is-
maintenance declaration, there's also a log of things to inspect, like you open up the inspection ports on the Cultec units and other things that we check. We look to see, is there silt buildup and blinding of the asphalt, those kinds of things. And then there's a log that I would then write down, sign, and give a copy both to staff and to the homeowner to keep. That's part of the maintenance declaration. So as part of that in the first 2 years and every 5 years thereafter, there should be recommendations made as to if there is an issue, how to correct them. So.
But if something came up in those first year or first, as I say, a rainstorm and the thing didn't quite do what we thought it was supposed to do, is that something that could be checked at that time?
Yes, I mean, it's you can tell whether or not the system is working because you can check and see if the Cultecs are draining out the way that they're supposed to, and if they're not, where they're located under the site plan, it's actually relatively easy enough to take steps to rectify that. So.
I think that that might give some comfort to some of the neighbors to make sure that the thing is working, if that was an acceptable approach.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would think any sort of design issues would be found out very quickly in the first 2 years if you're inspecting them annually.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are any other agency questions, comments?
just have-
Yes.
In response to Ms. Stoley's comments, I'd like to add a special condition that, to make it clear that the clean out of the ditch is not an option. It's not something just the applicant desires. It's in fact something that needs to be done and will be done within, I'll set a time frame of 6 months of commencement of work.
Okay. Okay, very good. Would someone like to make a motion? Otherwise, I'm happy to do it. Okay, I'll make the motion. Make a motion to approve with a modification to special condition 11, that would then instead read, the permittee shall note on the town land records requiring a licensed professional to inspect and certify the stormwater management structures annually for the first 2 years of operation, and then every 5 years to ensure the system has been properly maintained as required to sustain the design goal. A copy of filed note and copies of the periodic certification shall be submitted to the agency for its records. And the second condition, as stated by Director Sesta, regarding the clean out of the ditch. Is there a?
I can second that.
Okay. All in favor? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next item is application 2015-103, 656 River Road, Rizzoli Planning and Engineering LLC for Paul Blandori for wetland restoration. Doreen.
Okay. The agency began its review of this application in September due to a clearing violation. At the time, James McManus had done a soils delineation and determined that there were no wetland soils on the southern part of the property in this location here. That inspection or that delineation was done in September 2015. There was a previous soils delineation done by Timothy Welling in '93 that indicated there were wetland soils there. So there was a meeting of the soil scientists. They came together and ultimately they determined that no wetland soils exist in this location any longer. Timothy Welling indicated that potentially a cause could be a change in the drainage patterns on the property. As a result, the restoration required in this area is no longer required as there's no wetlands soils. There was a clearing at the front of the property within 50 feet of the Mianus River. A planting plan was required by staff. We did receive a plan that provides 4 trees and 6 larger shrubs. It's a very slopey area with a lot of outcropping. So staff believes that this planting plan is adequate to restore this area. There was a pipe installed in a pocket wetland at the front of the property that staff had inquired about. The homeowner indicated that that pipe was located there prior to his buying the property, and likely was put in to minimize the overflowing of it's sort of like a spring. So basically, the pipe is not likely to impact this wetland, provided that there's some riprap or plantings installed at the outlet to minimize any kind of erosion that might occur. And finally, there was a question. The adjacent property to the south is a town-owned property. There was a pond or a retention area that was bermed. There was a drainage corridor that came from that retention area onto the subject property. It was bermed. And on the other side of that, a trench was dug out. Staff has contacted Bruce Spayman of Parks and Recs, who agreed to correct that issue and return it to the previous conditions, so that will no longer be an issue. Staff recommends that the agency issue an order to correct with the conditions that are provided in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Good evening. My name is James McManus. I'm a certified professional soil scientist with JMM Wetland Consulting Services out of Newtown, Connecticut. Doreen did a nice job summarizing, but I'll just kind of reiterate what she just said. The property owner, Mr. Blandori, hired me back in September after he received the cease and correct, and he was questioning whether this area that he removed some trees was a wetland or not. So I said, sure, I'll come down and take a look at it. And at that time, I determined that the area indeed was not a wetland and had moderate well-drained soils. So that led us to our joint inspection, which was back in October 14th, a few weeks ago at this point. And again, as Doreen said, she was there, I was there, the property owner was there, and Mr. Welling was there, and we reviewed the area extensively with our spade and augers, and indeed, we came to the same conclusion that indeed the area had moderately well-drained soils, and it was no longer considered a wetland, and the area would be reclassified, if you will. But again, also part of the cease and correct was the area shown on red in the map, was some trees were removed associated with the Mianus River wetlands. And I had no disagreement with the delineation that was done along the Mianus River. So, as Doreen said, we added came up with by her direction, 10 plant species and some trees, and I also added some larger shrubs. I thought it would add a little diversity. I'm not sure how many folks have been to the site, but it's a full canopy, but the understory is very open. So I figured not to block Mr. Blandori's view of the pond and the river, but also to add a little structure to the area. So that was my reasoning behind adding some of the larger shrubs. The off-site area, we did review that as well. The berm, I don't know when it was installed, but it was new. The ditch was clearly dug recently. There were some evidence that there's been some soil disturbance there in the past, and clearly the road has been discharged in there for some time. And we again reviewed those soils, and by and large, we determined those soils to be of a somewhat poorly drained nature into a moderately well-drained nature, and not a regulated area. But it does, and it will continue to, because the water is going to continue to go to the area, receive runoff essentially from River Road.
So can I ask you, are there any conditions in the staff report that you disagree with?
No, I don't. I agree with everything that Doreen has said. And we are, and I welcome the staff to come on out and review the plantings prior to going in or during going in, make sure it was done correctly.
Are there any questions for Mr. McManus from the agency during this application?
Can I ask a question? The off-site depressional area.
Right.
I've observed it holding water for extended periods in the late winter and spring, I mean, months. So that would qualify as a watercourse?
You could go down that road. I would argue that the vegetation does not meet it, and the fact that the soils don't meet it, I would argue against that. And the fact that if you were to remove the road runoff going into that area, there would be no holding of water, in my opinion, at least for an extended period of time, because it's clearly being impacted by the road runoff. Every time it rains, that area fills up with water.
Yeah, but the road runoff is coming from a catch basin that is collecting water that's coming from higher elevations, that if there was no catch basin there, it would go to that low spot. It's just being conveyed by the catch basin and the pipe.
So what are you suggesting?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't necessarily agree that it wouldn't have water in it during those times of the year without the roadway drainage system.
Well, I didn't say it wouldn't have water, but I'm just saying I'm not sure how much more water would be there. The bottom line is the soils, whether you want to believe it or not, I mean, soils change at different rates. I mean, I could show you many articles that show the hydrology not there, but the soils look wet. And I could show you other articles that say this is wet all the time and the hydrology or the soils don't show it. Having said that, my snapshot in time, I reviewed those soils, and majority of them fell under the moderately well-drained to somewhat poorly drained area. And the fact that it looked like it had been excavated out shallowly now. It wasn't like a big divot. It helped it to pond water for the sole purpose of helping the road to have an area to collect. I can't argue with the watercourse definition. I would just stick to the soils myself. It's a tough one, because I'm sure, I'm not going to deny that there's water there in the spring. But I can show you a lot of places where water ponds and show you tractors can't get on their fields, but the soils are mildly well drained.
Any public comment or questions on this application? No? May I have a motion?
Motion to issue an order to correct with the conditions specified in the staff report.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I think Stefan got there a little bit faster. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This is approved. Okay, next up is 2015-107, 327 North Street, Soundview Engineering and Land Surveyors LLC for Robert Taylor for construction of residential additions, garage, septic system, and drainage system. Patricia is up for this one.
This is essentially an application for an addition to an existing home, and coincident with that, there is a new septic system that needs to be installed and pavement that needs to be removed in order to balance the impervious-pervious equation. When we first started reviewing this application, the aerial photos quickly showed that there's a wetland back here that was flagged previously, and likewise, this area was previously flagged. These were flagged in connection with either the 1999 or the 2005 previous application. But what's significant about the 2005 application is it required this area to be maintained as a meadow, not as a lawn. And then in this larger wetland system, the wetland was supposed to be delineated with boulders, with this area to the south being let to revert to meadow, and no stipulations with regards to the area north of this tree. This upper wetland, although the meadow had to be restored, there was no requirement for delineation of that boundary. So that was kind of interesting to find that. The site as a whole is lawn, so there's not a whole lot of natural vegetative systems left on site. Some significant trees that in the course of development, they are to be protected from the various activities associated with the septic and the home. It's my recommendation that since the quantity of buffer is being reduced, that the quality of the wetland be enhanced. This area, again, is it is lawn. The 2005 requirement to convert it to meadow was not met. That condition was not met, and it was in fact the desire to get the permit for this latest addition, which was an excellent motivating factor to bring the site into conformance. Given the amount of lawn on the site and the fact that these wetlands are the tips of a much larger wetland system, there is value to not only the on-site wetland to enhance its value beyond the meadow, but there's also value to the larger wetland system. So in the staff comments, there are conditions called out for the approval of the application, and the specific special condition that the mitigation plan be prepared and submitted depicting 2 to 2.5 inch caliper native shade trees placed 25 feet on center within the portions of the wetland committed to being a meadow in connection with the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse application 2005-45. There's a typo there. So that would be my comments and my proposal.
Welcome.
Good evening. Pete Finkmeyer with Soundview. I spoke with my client this afternoon concerning the recommended conditions of approval, and the client is certainly has conceded to the planting plan and putting in the trees and everything else in the staff report. Okay. Let me be clear on that before I proceed. A minor detail, if I may argue. Number 9 at the bottom of the special conditions, or 7, 8, and 9. 7 has to do with my certifications at the end of the project as part of the CO. And number 8 has to do with what engineering division now requires, and we call it the operations and maintenance plan, and includes inspection by engineers and the logs and everything else cited. Number 9 has changed from the end of the engineering division, and engineering no longer requires full-size Mylar maps to be put on file with the town clerk. Rather, as part of item 8, we get to reduce that map to an 8 by 11, so it fits into the rest of the package, and that gives the legal researchers the map information they need, and that same document cites the wetlands as having received the full-size copy. So I would like to ask for the removal of the Mylar requirement on being filed with the town clerk on the basis that engineering division has changed that process. You would still receive the exact same map, we just, the Mylar, surveyor hates Mylar.
I know.
And putting it on the land records, the town clerk hates big maps because they do books. And
Well,
if you understand where
I
I'm going with
appreciate the inconvenience of big maps. Item 9 is not as much for the agency's records. The intent there is really to get information on the land records, so when a house changes hands and a title search is being done,
Yes.
that information is captured and given to the new homeowner.
Well,
It
that
is
reduced
not
copy is still there on the land records.
on the land records.
As part of item 8, which is the operations and maintenance plan, which is an 8 by 11 packet of paper. And there is a reduced map in there that gives them the information, and that packet says, you have the big one.
If the
If I may.
agency is willing to allow the flexibility, I'm more than happy to work with you on 8 and 9 to make sure the intent of the agency is being met and we don't overburden town clerk and our
I would
our
certainly
files.
suggest that you check with Scott Marucci if
I shall do
you
so.
have any issue with what I'm saying. But outside of that detail, please, we are willing to
Okay.
follow staff comments and agents' approvals.
Okay.
Agency
Thank you.
requirements.
Are there other questions for Mr. Finkbinder? I have a question for Ms. Sesto. The original application had a boulder demarcation feature. Is that not part of your recommendation? And
The
I'm curious-
2005 had a demarcation feature
Right.
that was not put in
Right.
until just recently.
So it is- so it
Till
has-
this past week or so.
Okay, so it
it's-
has been,
It is there, and they, the meadow restoration, they aerated the soil, overseeded, as
I got it.
one would hope. And
Okay.
so we look forward to the meadow come spring.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Finkbinder? No? Are there any public questions or comments on this application? Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Stefan made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Bill seconds. All in favor? Okay. Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, 2015-123, 160 Bedford Road, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors LLC for 160 Bedford Road LLC for construction of a single-family residence.
The agency looked at this application in September. There were a couple of issues raised at that time that prompted the agency to delay the matter. One of the things the agency wanted to see was a construction phasing plan, and we have received that. I think it's a big improvement over what had previously been given to us. It shows parking and material storage areas and other features that were missing from the original erosion control plan. I did list 6 other items I think would be useful to have on the plan, including things like intermediate lines of silt fencing to tighten up the site after sort of this, there's some regrading that's going to be done in the front yard here and, around this sport court. But once that's done, there's no reason to have the erosion control line way down here. It can be pulled tight or kept tight until that work is done, and then, so it just gives the wetland here and the wetland in the back extra protection. These are all features and details that can be added to a final construction plan. There was a request for a landscaping plan, or actually a restoration plan for clearing that was done between 2003 and 2008. The applicant's landscape architect, Bill Kenny, came in with a plan that's cited in the staff report as dated October 15th. Looking at that plan, staff thought that it was a little bit skimpy in the southwest corner and the northwest corner, and a subsequent plan has been submitted. That's dated October 21st. I believe I forwarded a copy of that to you all via email. I would recommend that, since I believe that plan is a good one, that special condition 2 that I'm recommending, which was basically give us a revised plan, can be struck, and we can add the October 21st plan as one of the, along with the development plans that are cited in the permit under what the regulated activities are. So we're going to make this a requirement of the permit that they implement the October 21st plan. And I believe, yes, the special condition 9 says the planting plan shall be fully implemented by May 31st of next year. So there's a deadline set on that. Third thing was a request for an ecological assessment of existing and proposed conditions and impacts of the proposed activities might have on the wetlands. I just passed down Mr. Kenny's report. It's dated October 23rd. In summary, as stated in paragraph 2, he finds that the proposed activities will not adversely impact the wetlands and watercourses on or off the site, or their capacity to perform wetland and watercourse functions. And I would agree with this assessment. So I think those outstanding information request items have been addressed very well. And I would recommend that the agency issue a permit with the conditions provided, as I stated, with that revision of striking special condition number 2 and adding the October 21st planting plan in the sort of the heading of the permit that's issued.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
How are you doing, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency? Once again, John Hegney for the record. We did get a chance to meet with Mr. Colossi on this a couple times. We agree with the findings in his staff report, and anytime he wants to take a special condition off of a report, we welcome that. So we would request your approval.
Thank you. Are there any agency questions for Mr. Hegney?
I have a question for Madam Director, and it has to do with buffers. And that this property certainly has enough space for the 60-foot buffer being continued all around the wetland as opposed to its, no, if you'll notice there's a,
Oh, a couple closer places.
yeah. If we ask the applicant to move the sport court a little bit to the north and west, we could have a nice 60-foot buffer all around the wetland. What's your feeling about that?
My opinion on the buffers is that we have a 100-foot regulated area associated with the wetlands in town, except if you're in a public drinking water supply, then you start out with 150. That every applicant should be working from those as a starting point and then justifying why less than that is appropriate. Either the quality of the wetland doesn't warrant it or other site constraints mean they can't achieve it. In sites where they were previously developed and you're not working with native landscape assemblages, there is perhaps more discussion, but there's also more opportunity to improve conditions in exchange perhaps for a sport court being a little closer than the previous garage or those sorts of opportunities. I'm not generally in favor of a uniform start with 35 feet or 40 or 60 and draw a line. I think the applicant's responsibility is to convince the agency that what they've put forward is in fact the best that they can do given the balance of all the features on site.
So I guess that leaves it to you, Mr. Hegney. Is there a prudent and feasible alternative that moves the court closer to the house and gives us a larger buffer?
I'll ask Brian Muller from Soundview Engineering to field that.
How you doing? Brian Muller from Soundview Engineers. Let me just move this back so I can see it as well. Now the sport court, yes, is a little bit closer to the wetlands than the existing garage, along with a bunch of existing pervious surfaces as the asphalt driveway. Now the reason for the location of the sport court is simple cut and fill. I had to balance the cuts and the fills, and I have a 6-foot high retaining wall here. If I was to move it to the left, the wall on the southwest side, it would be over 6.5 feet, which means it would have to meet required setbacks. It also wouldn't flow as well along with the ledge here. There would be a lot more hammering of ledge. If I was to move it closer to the house, I'd have to have a bigger cut. Also, the walls would have to get higher on the downhill side.
What if you were to rotate it
That's just-
20 degrees clockwise, so that it's more in line with the existing topography along its long edge?
Well, when you play tennis or anything, you'd like the court to face north-south for lighting purposes. When you go to serve, you don't really want to throw it up and be looking into the sun. Not that, that should be a viable constraint, but it is a considerable reason for having it oriented in this direction.
Yeah, it would, which way is north on this? You want it pointing north-south, so it would be really
Yeah.
northeast, southwest by
Yeah.
a few degrees. I think it's still within acceptable design parameters for a tennis court.
I'd have to go over that with the client. I know he's pretty set on the layout of it. And I'd also have to look at, the cut fills, see how it pans out, because I know I was very constrained by this corner right here, as well as the other corner as well. By rotating it.
You're actually pulling that corner further away,
This corner up, and this corner would be going down.
slightly down, yeah.
Slightly down, yeah. But that would also incur extra filling closer to the buffer. I would pull it away from here a little bit, or actually not the buffer, because there really is only the 100-foot upland
Know what I'm
review
talking
area.
about?
Yeah.
I don't know where the
Those
35
rotated
foot came
legs.
from, I just,
Yeah, but you could turn it like that and pull it up.
Yeah, but then you're serving into the sun.
You could serve into the sun at some point during the day anyway.
we can certainly look at that.
Generally, not the way they're doing it.
I would have to request that it would be a condition of approval to maybe submit alternative options and leave it to the staff to make the final decision.
No, I think we'd want to see it.
I think we'd want to see it myself,
Okay?
okay? And I think there are lots of alternative ways of putting the court. I mean, the sun does sit in the south at part of the day around noon, and somebody serving into the sun, if they get up early enough to play.
Yeah. Well, being an avid tennis player, if this was my property, this would be the only way to really build a tennis court. You only want it facing north-south. You're not going to want to have it rotate in any other direction. It flows perfectly with the way the house is laid out, the way the property is, and it meets the required setbacks. If I move it, I can certainly show you alternatives. I have no problem with
Well,
that.
the question is, can you demonstrate that there is no prudent and feasible alternative that gets it further away from the wetland?
Yeah, I can look at that, yeah.
Go ahead, then.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Alternatively, if the agency wanted to make that condition of the approval, rotating the court, we'd be happy to do that as part of an approval this evening.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing then is that your client is amenable to rotating the court as part of it and approval.
Correct.
It's a question of whether we want to see that, and then you'll get that same decision next month potentially.
I would say it's simple if we just make the special condition that the client that the applicant will have a 60-foot buffer around the wetland.
Regardless of the rotation.
Regardless, we don't care which way it looks, as long as there's a 60-foot buffer.
Okay,
And with that condition, I'd approve it.
and and that's achievable by rotating it that amount?
I don't care how they achieve it.
I don't know if we can make that, agree to that this time, but we'll certainly take a look at it and return.
We'll talk to you next month. Okay?
Motion to delay.
Hold on. Oh, slow down there, Buckaroo. Is there any public questions or comments on this application? Any other agency comments or questions?
Can I ask a question? I mean, I don't have a scale with me, but I'm wondering if it's because you have wetlands to the east, south, and west. And so if you're going to keep 60, thank you, if you're going to keep 60 feet at 30 scale, 60, I mean, I don't even know whether they could fit the sport court there at all.
Sure they could.
Well,
So
I guess I propose let's let them,
they can,
okay,
I
all
mean,
right.
there's an expense to delaying for the applicant, which if it's unreasonable.
Okay.
We'd just like to add one minor detail too, which I failed to mention before. The sport court is the main drainage system on the site. It'll handle the rates of runoff. It also reduces volume significantly from existing to proposed conditions. Now, under the sport court, it's all porous asphalt. There's a deep stone base in segments under here. There's 3 different segments, 3 different elevations based on the test holes and seasonal high groundwater. So if we were to rotate or move it up, that would significantly impact the amount of storage I could provide from existing proposed conditions.
If it were rotated, wouldn't it just
So you have
array
to
out
re-engineer
differently?
the drainage or something?
Yeah, I would have to re-engineer the drainage. And I don't know if it helps, but I believe this house footprint is going to shrink significantly at some point. I'm not
Perhaps
sure.
if Mr. Kenny explained the planting plan in association with this proposal, that would give the agency something to work on with regards to some functional changes.
Good evening. Bill Kenny of William Kenny Associates, landscape architect and wetland scientist. So in this drawing, the light green is our areas of the wetland on the west side, man-made pond. Today, the limit of lawn follows something like that and extends pretty much right up to that pond. Sometime between 2003 and 2008, by a previous owner, there was quite a bit of tree removal in this area. So what this proposal is to remove all that lawn area that's through here. This dark green is a buffer that's being converted from lawn to meadow and shade trees. So we're planting a number of deciduous shade trees, putting in meadow here. There's a small wetland off-site to the south here. So we're putting this buffer all along here, all along that, extending from here to here. We're eliminating all that area of lawn. So that includes some quite a bit of lawn that's in the wetland, as well as 35 feet beyond that. So there's quite a bit of conversion of areas of lawn that could be treated with fertilizers and pesticides today that will be converted to meadow to help significantly improve the habitat of the wetlands and the water quality of the wetland and the pond areas on the site, providing a really substantial buffer to those resources. And
Bill, what's the rationale for the 35 feet, uniform 35 feet?
based on guideline setbacks that the town has used for many years, and the conclusion that by eliminating the lawn, that we're certainly making this better. At a minimum, we're not harming the wetland system there, so we're using that 35-foot buffer to establishing the meadow within the wetland as well as outside of the wetland area.
So if you were to expand the buffer in this area and bring it up to the slope here, retaining walls,
Right.
and really fill in some of this area that was cleared, I acknowledge it was not the current homeowner, but was wrongfully cleared between 2003 and 2008.
Right.
It doesn't look like this area is particularly significant as far as property use. The front of the property is really beautiful and expansive, such that taking this off of the lawned portion of the property isn't really taking away from the functional use of it. And that way you'd increase the protection, increase the restoration of the cleared areas in the past. And I would suggest this, up along the pond here, there's that slope that goes straight down into the pond, and there's really not a whole lot of protection. So that is terrific back there, and I would agree, if I had that pond, I'd want to get down to it and enjoy it too. I don't know if lawn within 35 feet, or you can expand that and have paths so that it's aesthetically pleasing and serviceable. You know, is 35-foot line the only thing that can be done there? Or is there something else that can be functionally more significant and yet still attractive to the homeowner?
Right. I think certainly we could add buffer in here right up to the wall, the retaining wall on the south side of the tennis court, and wrap that around. I don't think that's a problem at all. I think that's a good thing. Possibly could expand it there, but definitely could expand it there. I'd speak with the applicant to offer anything more than that. But
Okay.
does any of that discussion have the potential to help for a decision this evening, or?
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not speaking for myself, but I guess my feeling is I would like to, I think a prudent and feasible alternative could be rotating, slightly rotating the court to pull it away from the wetland. So I would like to see an investigation of that. And
The only part that's in there is this little bit here.
anything else? Are there any other questions for the applicant from us? Is there any public comment or questions on this application? Okay.
Motion to delay?
Is there a second to delay?
Second.
Okay, Stefan was in there first. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you.
It's unfortunate.
Okay, that was Bedford.
Okay, just, Bill or John, we're going to need an extension letter.
Okay, on to new applications. 2015-080, 81 Brookside Drive, SC Minor, Inc., for Joseph and Margaret Pellegrino for piping of a watercourse.
This application actually might easily have been up with pending applications. It's been hanging with us for a pretty long time, and it was withdrawn this afternoon,
Okay,
so it's done.
okay, very good. Okay, 2015-128, 33 Loeb Pond Road, or Loeb Pond Road. SC Minor and Company for Paul Roche for the construction of a pool house, carriage house, driveway, and drainage system 40 feet from a pond.
Right, the agenda was not revised per changes that the applicant has made to their application. Since the application was made, they've eliminated the pool and the pool house from the proposal. I think there's also an infiltration system, maybe, or there was a meadow proposed to take drainage from that, and that's been taken off. So all those activities were in the woods over here. Staff had some major issues with that proposal, so I'm happy to see that it's not on plan, and if in the future the property owner wants to apply for a pool, they might explore putting it off the back of their house, holding it up with a retaining wall or something, which is a very common way to do it that I've seen around town on sloping sites like this. Current proposal is strictly to construct this new driveway, which loops to a motor court in front of the house and then has another entrance coming over to a motor court near the garage. And, as part of that process, they'll just take out the existing driveway that comes in straight off of the road. They have designed a reserved septic area here, which was previously considered by the agency. I don't think that is any sort of an issue. It's well removed from the wetland. The pond is down here at the base of the hill on the west side of the property. Drainage from the driveway will go to a rain garden here to the southwest of the house. Now, the prior design had been reviewed by DPW Engineering Division, and that included all the, pool, all that stuff. They had some issues with that. Since the revisions came in for just the driveway and this rain garden was tweaked a little bit, I sent the comments down, the revisions down to DPW. They were not able to do a second review on this month. I did speak to Mr. Marucci today. He, based on his prior review, felt that any changes to the design here that would be required to make the numbers work out would not be major. He hasn't done the review, but he doesn't think it's going to be a big deal. Either this plan is completely adequate as it is, or any revisions are going to be minor.
Okay.
So this is one case where I think without his sign-off, the agency may feel comfortable proceeding, but adding a condition of precondition that review has to be completed satisfactorily before any site work can begin. Let's see. There is some gully erosion to the south of the house that I've recommended the applicant repair, and I think I put a deadline on that because that should be done whether or not right, that's special condition number 1, by October 31st of next year, whether or not the activities are implemented. So whether the driveway is built or anything else is done, this gully has to be fixed. So I guess after speaking with Mr. Marucci, and if the agency feels comfortable adding that condition of prior review and approval by engineering, I'd recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Hi, Lauren Lockwood on behalf of SE Minor and the applicant. We agree to all of the comments and recommendations placed by staff and what Bob just said earlier as well. And we also spoke with our project engineer, and we found that it is feasible to install the long level spreader. And we also will develop plans to repair the gully and stabilize it as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Agency questions? Is there any public comment or questions on this application? No?
Excuse me. Can I
Yes.
just verify that the drainage feature, that's outside the wood line? Or is that within the wood line?
I would have to double check. Is it in the wood line or outside the wood line?
Edge.
On the edge.
Okay. The drainage feature is part of the driveway application? Yes. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion on this application?
Motion to approve with the addition of a condition that says prior to the commencement of any on-site permit-related activity, that a sign-off from the DPW Engineering Division on the drainage design has been received by the agency.
Thank you. Is there a second on that motion? Bill seconds. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. Sorry, next on the agenda is application 2015-130, 57 Park Avenue. Edward J. Frateroli, Incorporated, for Sunset Holdings LLC, for construction of a new single-family residence partially in a wetland.
A vacant 2-acre, 0.2 acre parcel. There is a wetland running right down the middle of the parcel. The parcel is effectively flat with a very slight rise here at the western end. Records within the office show that there's a wetland on this property that has an unnatural stop at the property line, and then I think if I had to put my best professional guess in, that this parcel has been filled historically and this parcel has been filled historically, such that the wetland that likely consumed a much greater amount of this neighborhood has been filled and disjointed. On this particular parcel, there is a clean back half of the lot is technically a wetland. I would encourage members to see the site because although on paper this looks rather threatening, in the field it is not at all. I would suspect that most people would not even think that back half is a wetland. Normally you would see within the herbaceous vegetation little sedges or little rushes trying to make their way, capitalizing on that wetland soil type, but that is not even the case. So functionally, the front half of the lot and the back half of the lot are indistinguishable. Consequently, having the house up to the wetland boundary and with a deck over the wetland boundary does not give me cause for great alarm. The applicant is proposing a foot or less of fill within the wetland to provide positive drainage down towards this rain garden. The rain garden will receive runoff from the roof of the house, will be conveyed back. The rain garden, because of the high groundwater situation, has a liner so that it doesn't actually take on groundwater, and the water that, the storm water that enters it won't be infiltrating. Instead, it will overflow into a 24-inch diameter culvert piping system that serves as the detention, and then will overflow out to the much smaller, I think they're 4 and 6-inch pipes associated with the Park Avenue storm drainage system. Given the circumstances associated with the wetland, I would recommend approval. of this application. With the special conditions, pretty standard fare on the application, special conditions.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Welcome.
Yep, for the record, John Puglisi from Edward J. Federoli, professional engineer. Also, Matt Pop is here from Environmental Land Solutions, who prepared the environmental assessment of the property and the landscape plan. We have no issues with any of the conditions of the approval, and just open up for questions.
Okay, thank you. Are you attempting a sizable basement on this property, given the high groundwater, or?
The basement is, the basement is, it's not a very big footprint, but it's just going to be this piece right here. This piece is the garage, so it's not a very large basement. We are kind of restricted because we had to move the house forward, and we have limited, usable area on the site.
Is there a sump pump associated with the basement?
Yeah, we have a series, there's a sump pit or a structure here that will be connected to under drains underneath the slab, and then it'll be pumped up into the storm drain.
So it will not be part of the, it won't be going into the detention portion of the storm?
No, it will not be going to detention. The detention stops at, there's a wall in this structure here, and the control structures are on this side of that wall, but the pump will go to the other side, unrestricted out to the storm drain.
And where does the storm drain discharge?
This storm drain, well, it goes into Long Island Sound, but I don't know. It heads in the south direction.
Okay, so you don't know the.
But it is a
the
true
outflow.
storm drain and not,
No, it's a true storm. It's an 18-inch. It's an 18-inch clay pipe, I believe.
okay. Okay. Very good. And the roof leaders, do they feed the, do they?
Yep, all
go to
the roof
storm drain, or
leaders.
Do they go to the?
Yeah, it's kind of, we're reversing. All the water from the house, the roof, will drain back to the rain garden from this side as well as from this side. And then we receive water from adjoining properties here, adjoining properties here, and adjoining properties there. All will feed into the rain garden. And even the back end of the lawn, we pitch this back towards the rain garden. So we're going to collect our lawn area in here.
Thank you.
So the staff report has some comments on the rain garden design. Are those all, have they been addressed? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I provided a separate letter with the revisions, with the liner and the.
So staff is happy with us, right?
Staff is happy.
Very good. Any other questions for the applicant? Are there any public questions or comments on this application? No? Would someone on the agency?
I just have a question. I have a
Please.
question for staff, maybe Pat. In the special conditions 1 and 2, maybe it's just the way I'm reading them, but the reference is to, for the planting plan and the installed cost as part of the determination for the ultimate bond, seems to be redundant in the second as well. I mean, it's.
So the first condition is the requirement of the applicant to submit the estimate for the cost of the planting plan so that we get an idea of what it would actually cost. Right. And then the second condition calls for a bond to actually be posted. Now, pursuant to our discussion on Tuesday night, the agency did express some hesitation with going with the full approved value of the planting plan, and that some percentage of that would be more appropriate.
Well, I wasn't questioning so much what the amount is or the percentage of whatever the amount is, but just the concept of the approved value of the planting plan shall be submitted to the agency. That's in the second condition, and it's also essentially the same thing in the first condition.
So the first condition says, intended to say, the applicant should submit essentially a list of the plants and the cost to purchase and install those. We would then review that list to see that it is an appropriate accounting for the work that's supposed to be done. And then to comply with the second condition, the applicant would post a $6,000 bond plus the amount that was approved as being
All right, two
appropriate to
steps.
cover the planting plan in item 1.
Okay, 2 steps.
Two
Okay.
steps.
All right.
Does the agency prefer to back down the full approved value of the planting plan pursuant to our discussions last Tuesday night?
Well, you're amenable to, you've reviewed the requirements here and
Yeah,
are in agreement?
we have no issue with the staff report as it is, but
Okay.
if the agency would like to reduce it, obviously, we would agree to that.
Au contraire.
Bill, you have something in mind?
No,
Okay, you just
I was just trying to
okay.
combine the ideas, but I understand it's a separate step.
Separate step. Okay, very good. Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next application is 2015-132, 34 Quail Road, Barbara and Joseph Barata, for repair of a water line partially in a wetland.
All right, back in mid-September, staff was doing an inspection on an adjoining property on Doverton Drive and observed work was underway at 34 Quail Road, which backs up to this common driveway, which isn't really Doverton Drive, it's sort of a common driveway off Doverton. The work involved repairing the existing potable water line in this location, and it crosses a little intermittent watercourse and a wetland. This was an emergency situation, and staff authorized the completion of the repairs due to the emergency. Mr. Barata explained to me that in order to repair this, they had to shut the water down, which shut the water off to his neighbors, so they really were stuck. They had to get this thing done. But, you know, so I think this is a situation, one of these emergency-type situations where the work has been done. I recommend the agency issue an after-the-fact permit. And I guess Mr. Barata is here. Later in the meeting, we're going to talk about what was done to effect the repair and if the current condition of the site is completely due to activities that were absolutely necessary to do the repair, or whether there was some additional site work done while concurrently with the repair, because there has been some vegetative changes and looks like some filling and grading that may have been done there. But this is my observation, and we want to get the full story later in the meeting. But at this point, for this application, I recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions provided.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Well, my name is Joe Barata, and I own the property with my wife. We've been there for like almost 40 years, I guess 38 years. And when we built the house 38 years ago, we put the water line there. And it's been okay since then. However, I don't know why the water line broke. Maybe it's because it's 38 years old, or because there was work done next door that could have changed the character of the whatever. It certainly changed the character of the watercourse, because we have a different watercourse now than we had before. And I think the water is draining more towards my property than it was towards Doverton Drive at this point. I think we looked at that with Mr. Benton today. And also, basically, we didn't change anything there. The only thing that happened there that was a problem is that we tried to repair the breakage by hand without going with the machine. And we did it, and it worked for one day. and it broke again. So we had to go back and repair the water line, and we had to dig out the area by Doverton Drive where we had the shut-off. We couldn't shut off the water at that point because when they built Doverton Drive, they filled the property another 4 feet so that the water line was 8 feet below ground at that point. So we had to go in and dig that out to put in a valve so that if something like that would happen again, we wouldn't shut off the whole community. So basically what happened at that point, since that southeast corner is like a quagmire at this point, the machine that we were using to repair the water line sunk into the mud. And we had to dig it out and everything else. So that's basically what you see is the repair. We had to bring in a little bit of topsoil to fix that up, and we reseeded it at this point. What we'd like to do there is just let the thing come back the way it was. I think that would help us because the water line is there. We would like a cover of 3 or 4 feet of vegetation, of natural vegetation, which we had before. And we'd like that again because that insulates the pipe from freezing. And basically what we did to restore the premises at that point was that we seeded with fescue. We left as many roots up as possible so that the natural vegetation would grow again. And that's it. That's the story.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to reiterate, we will come back to this later in the meeting, Mr. Barata. You've given us a lot of background already, so hopefully it'll go quickly when we do
Yeah.
get there, but
Actually,
we're not done with the question of...
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. I think it probably makes sense to, if we can just change the order of the agenda and hear the other piece now.
Yeah.
And that way you don't have to sit and stay until you come up again on the agenda later tonight.
Yeah,
So we'll just cover it now.
Talk
Okay?
about the violation portion.
Okay. Should I stand here?
Yes.
Sure, why not?
Please.
Okay.
All right, because this is now a cease and correct hearing, cease and correct order 2015-25, I'm going to direct the agency's attention to a couple of things. I guess I'd say my field inspection on October 6th that I've conducted in relation to the review of this application that was just approved. An email I sent to Mr. and Mrs. Barata. Did I say April 6th? October 6th. I can't read dates this evening. So October 6th, I did a field inspection. October 15th, I sent an email to the Baratas basically saying, hey, it looks like there's been a lot of what I remember as being mostly shrubby vegetation removed from the southeast corner of the property, and asked them to just advise them that this would be considered separately from the emergency repair. All of this is summarized in the violation summary dated October 19th that you all received in your packets. This violation summary includes 2 photographs I took on October 6th of the southeast corner of the property, showing the intermittent water course. There's actually 2 of them, and the area of grass growing through mulch at the intersection of those 2 intermittent water courses. Cease and correct order October 19th, 2015 was sent to the Baratas explaining that we would be having a hearing this evening. And that, I would note that cease and correct order went out before Director Sesto looked at it, and she said that the last paragraph of it, which talks about additional enforcement and fines, really probably didn't need to be boilerplated into this on this matter. So I did send an email to the Baradas explaining to them not to be too concerned about that boilerplated text. So that's where we are. With the violation summary, I attached a GIS image from 2013 showing the southeast corner of the property. Comparing this image to the two photographs in the violation summary, I think it's clear that there was non-turf grass vegetation, shrubby, scrubby vegetation removed from that area. And my question to the Baradas was all of this work required as part of the emergency repair of the water line, or did they do additional work concurrently with that? That's all I have to say. I guess Mr. Baradas given us much of the story.
The only thing that we wanted to do there is repair the water line. We have no intention of using that property in any other manner than it was used in the past, and we would like the vegetation to regrow there as fast as possible, because it's really for our protection.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
So any vegetation that was removed was related to the repair of
Yes.
the pipe?
Absolutely.
Including the watercourse? It says in the report here, straightening the banks of the watercourse?
What happened was when the machine got stuck, it was like to pull that machine out, so everything got disrupted. So what we did was we repaired it and brought it back to where it was as best we could at the time.
So that repair was as a result of the machine getting...
Right. So, and basically, I think right now, if you look at it, it's all seeded, there's fescue growing, and hopefully the grapevines and the bramble bushes and the natural, they'll come back soon enough, I hope.
Okay, all right. Based upon Mr. Barada's comment, do you see a need for a planting plan for this area, Bob?
Well, I think the likelihood of stuff coming up is good. The problem is what's going to come up. It's probably going to be multiflora rose and other invasive species rather than, very many native species. So it might be a good idea to get some desirable plants, get it put in there to get a jump on the invasives.
I guess,
Basically, there's grapevines that grow there that are natural. You have bramble bushes. I could show you the vegetation that exists there now. I don't see where they're invasive. That's been there for the last 40 years. Why should we replant something that exists naturally? I mean, it'll come back up, and next spring, next summer, it'll be back. Why do we have to go do something like that?
Fair enough.
I would make a suggestion, if I could.
Sure.
Bob, if you would go out and go through the property with Mr. Barada and point out the invasives that you're concerned about, so that he better understands what it is that you're saying at this point, and he can take whatever steps he chooses to make sure that his property reverts to the situation it had before. You willing to do that?
I mean, the plantings that we had there before really protect us from our neighbor.
No, I understand. What I'm suggesting is, since Bob is quite an expert, that he can help you.
Sure.
You're not being forced to do anything. I'm just suggesting he goes out and he gives you some of his expertise so that you can best protect your own property.
Because what may come back is not necessarily what was there prior. It may be stuff that you won't be too happy with. Maybe you will be, but Bob can help sort of tell you what it is that will come back now that it's been cleared.
Okay.
Okay. May I have, I guess, how do we handle this then?
Right, if the agency feels that the work was related to the repair, I would recommend, rather than, as I said in the violation summary, that it, well, I didn't have any recommendation because I kind of thought this is where we'd end up.
Okay.
My recommendation is the agency lift cease and correct order 2000, what was it, 2015-25.
Someone like to say so?
So moved.
There we go. And all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just ask, is, because of what Mr. Barata said about the changed nature of the watercourses down where the repair was, is there any reason to inspect the neighboring property to see what's been going on there?
No, we do inspect it because they're building a new house there
I
that the
know.
agency has a permit out on. I mean, I have to say, during construction, there may be a change in peak rates of runoff because the drainage system that was designed for that site has not been fully put online. But and frankly, watercourses change. So there may be some meandering of a little intermittent watercourse. At this point, you know, the banks of the watercourse are stone lined, so I don't believe they're going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
That doesn't really concern us. Thank you.
Okay, next up, 2015-134, 61 Hillside Drive, Michael and Masumith Priu, for installation of utility lines.
All right. Last month, the agency approved a permit for the Department of Public Works to reestablish the drainage swale along the side of Francine Drive. And last month, the agency received this application later in the meeting. At that time, staff alerted the agency to the fact that in order to implement this project, which the Prius want to run utility lines from sources on Francine Drive to the back and into their, through the back of their property on 61 Hillside to their house. The projects kind of had to be considered in tandem, or else there's a good chance that DPW would finish their work and then the Prius would have to dig it up. The agency did give its consent to sort of fast-track the review of this. So staff prepared a report October 7th, which you have a copy of, that gives the details of the work that's proposed. And this staff report was sent to the Prius with the understanding that the agency would look at the application tonight and might approve this as recommended or alter conditions or maybe even not approve it. So they were kind of going at their own risk. They have posted a bond. They have done some other the conditions of the permit, proposed permit. Frankly, I don't think they've started the work yet, so it's not an after-the-fact situation like the last application we heard. It's a very simple application, a utility trench, crossing an intermittent water course, which is, you know, the roadside swale along Francine Drive, and then going through the back of their property. As I said, they've addressed many of the preconditions that were recommended in the staff report. They have not addressed them all, so I don't believe the work has started. And, I mean, I can go blow by blow into what it is, but it's quite straightforward. I recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone from the applicant here? No? Is there any agency questions on this application for staff, I guess? No? Any public comment? Someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? So moved. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is application 2015-136, 88 Pexlin Road, SC Minor and Company for James and Carol Flanagan for designation of a B100A, 70 feet from wetlands, and installation of a rain garden 20 feet from wetlands, both in association with residential additions.
Right. This property has a pretty sizable wetland in the back here, which I guess is I want to say east. Is that right? No, south. Larry, south?
South.
I could probably look at a plan and tell you.
Yeah, there's the arrow.
East, southeast. These are the one I want to distribute. Most of the activities being proposed are well removed from the wetland, up around the existing house. Along with residential alterations, they're going to modify the driveway, designate a septic reserve area, and do drainage associated with this. The closest activity is this rain garden down in the southern part of the property. It's not in the wetland. It's in an area of lawn. It's about 20 feet from, the edge of the wetland, which in this location is also lawn. And there's about 35 feet between the rain garden and the natural state wetland beyond a deer fence that runs north-south along here and does encroach into parts of the wetland. I think the rain garden will actually be a benefit to this wetland edge. The sheet S4 states that it's to be planted with native plants rather than turf grass. And let's see, the DPW has said that the design is okay in general, but made a comment that in order to be above modeling, enough above modeling here, this rain garden has to be raised a little over a foot. And I was curious, I did ask Mr. Liebman, I don't know whether he's been able to do this, is to explain to the agency what change that would make in the extent of grading toward the wetland. Will fill now have to go into the wetland, or is it just a minor change that will have fill closer but not into the wetland? Let's see. As I said, there is a deer fence that encroaches into the wetland. This is not a new deer fence. And I would say that the fence, where it is not going to have any adverse impact on the wetland as long as the bottom is raised 6 inches off the ground. And there is a little gully called out as a ditch on your plan that I'd recommend the agency require to be repaired. I passed out proposed revisions to my proposed condition on that sets a deadline for the repair of the ditch, whether or not the other activities are ever implemented. So we do want this to be repaired regardless, and we also want the deer fence to be raised by a date certain regardless. And those are the two revisions I would make to the recommended conditions of approval, but I do recommend the agency issue a permit with those modifications to the conditions in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Larry Liebman from SE Minor. Let's take the rain garden. We'll talk about that first. The edge of the rain garden and the fill has not moved. What we did was we raised it by pulling the backside to berm up. It's about 8 inches to get the actual storage that was needed. So that's what the plan that you're looking at right now. I gave Doreen a copy of it. And we will submit that as part of the final construction drawings. As far as the drainage ditch stabilization, we have no problem. And as far as the raising of the deer fence, it's what you asked for, it's what you'll get. We have no other objections to anything that was stated in the staff report. Pardon? No. The rain garden stays exactly where it is. If there's the berming that happens, it's on the opposite side to make it actually work, to get it up to the proper elevation.
Okay, Mr. Levy, could you talk a little bit about what's happening in terms of landscaping on the slope between the rain garden and the wetland edge? Is that
At this point, at this point, there isn't anything there, but if it's desired that you have us do something more to stabilize, we weren't doing anything.
What's the existing condition?
It's
Is it
pretty much turf right now. And so theoretically, once the rain garden gets built in there and gets forgotten, I don't think that they're going to be maintaining on the opposite side of it anyway, so it's just going to go natural.
Yeah, it seems like trying to maintain a little strip of turf in there seems silly, so maybe
Right.
it should be more purposeful than just letting it revert to whatever.
I don't think that there's an issue with that. We can put that on the final construction drawing.
I'm sorry, Larry, so are you saying the area that, portion of the wetland that's lawn,
No,
they're going to just,
That skinny section right there.
this here?
Yeah,
Or that
between,
there?
yeah,
What's
between
skinny?
the rain garden and that wetland edge to the east.
Yeah.
That, right there.
Right there. Any opportunity to allow the entire wetland to go back to meadow, similar to what's beyond? I don't know if that lower section has,
This is the wetland edge here.
yes?
All right. And what you're asking is, the wetland does this job.
Yeah.
And here, what you're asking me is, if that becomes the permanent edge, I have to ask the applicants, they're here. I don't see why that would be an issue, though. I think that, if we can create an area that's mowed less frequently, and let some woodies come in, I don't think that would be a problem. Would that be a problem? They're shaking their head no, so it's okay. Then I will say, yes, we can add, we will get a good line on a plan for the final construction drawing that staff can review and approve prior to the start of construction.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Leitman on this application? Is there any public questions or comments? No? Would someone on the agency like to make a motion?
Motion to approve with the conditions listed, including the revised special conditions number 5 and 9, dated October 21, 2015.
Second.
Yeah, what about the, with a revised planting plan to be reviewed with staff regarding the wetland edge?
Okay, and that, yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, application 2015-137, 480 Cognywog Road, Cumin Associates, Inc., for Lars Nielsen for construction of new retaining walls 20 feet from wetlands, planting in wetlands.
All right, this property was developed to its, basically its current condition in 1989. At that time, this retaining wall was approved by the agency. You know, the house is up here closer to the road. The wetland is, and a watercourse system is back on the, that would be the west side of the property. This is kind of upside down. This retaining wall, you know, after decades is now falling apart. It's a dry-laid boulder wall, and the applicant would like to replace it with a new engineered retaining wall, which this doesn't show it on this plan, but it'll follow pretty much this line to about this point, and then applicant wants to bump it out over here in order to create a level area adjacent to the house where they can do ornamental landscape gardening. This portion of the retaining wall that's going to bump out over here would extend to within about 20 feet of the edge of the wetland. I should note that between the existing retaining wall and the wetland, it's a backyard. It's maintained as lawn. So the bump out of the retaining wall is not going to require the removal of any native woody vegetation or anything. Now, in recognition that this is sort of going beyond what the agency previously reviewed and approved, the applicant did submit a substantial planting plan that would enhance both the wetland and significantly reduce the amount of lawn behind the retaining wall. And, you know, as I stated in the staff report, I think the plan as it is, if it were to be maintained into the future, would be an improvement to the site, even though the wall is getting closer, because there is so much lawn down here below this retaining wall, and the planting plan is, as I said, substantial. I did raise concerns about, however, about whether practically into the future with new property owners perhaps, that level area that would be created near the house might entice someone to try to expand the house in that direction, build a garage, do something else like that, which in turn would work against maintaining the restored wetland and wetland buffer area in a more natural state, because it would push residential and landscaping activities out of this area that they're creating next to the house. I did speak to the applicant's agent and suggested that they consider if they have alternatives that would meet their landscaping desires without going into that closer to the wetland as the current proposal shows. I also think the buffer demarcation they had, or the edge of lawn demarcation on another plan, I think it's sheet P3 was a little bit light, so I asked for a more robust demarcation feature, and I wanted some details as to how they propose to protect all of these plantings from deer, because the deer are all over the place back here. Now, after conversing with Mr. Kwan and getting his positive feedback on these 3 points, I thought perhaps if we get to a point of resolution this evening, the agency might want to issue a permit. So I've passed out, you know, what I think is probably a pretty decent list of conditions that would apply to this application, but we need to hear what our applicant has for us this evening. At this point, I'm recommending delay.
You may want the next sheet.
This is the bump out. The existing wall goes more like this, and the bump out goes more like, sort of this area, and the wetlands over here.
Good evening. For the record, Mark Kwan for Cummin Associates, Landscape Architects. My main points for our design proposal for increasing the terrace space is there's a significant amount of the property that's inaccessible by the clients because of the wetland and the watercourse. They're avid gardeners. They have significant ledge conditions on their property, which don't allow them to do that much gardening. They also had a pool installed earlier this year, and the site's been left in a just devastating state on the terrace level due to the equipment access. So they want to create the terrace space to be more garden. And in doing so, they asked for some additional space at the terrace level. I see this as a true benefit to the site because the daily activity will be limited to the upper level in the terrace. There won't be any necessary activity down closer to the wetland in the buffer area. Also, the terrace is going to be, or on the perimeter of the terrace is going to be pool enclosure fencing, minimum of 4 feet, with gates, self-closing, self-latching. So that, again, is going to promote more of the daily activity up at the terrace level. So increasing the square footage of the terrace is going to give them more space for achieving what they want to do with their gardening ambitions.
Okay.
And as Bob had mentioned, we are proposing significant improvements to the buffer as far as planting, woodies, trees, perennials. The client's desire is to have all they see when they look out is the wetland area. And right now, it's pretty barren, and it's not, they want to improve it.
Mhm.
So it's their desire to invest money, significant funds in the back to improve the planting and just make it more attractive. So it's, they're not, currently there's turf up to the wetland area, and they're not married to turf down there. They'd rather see something that looks nicer, flowers, and they're willing to do away with a lot of that, which in turn had us develop that back area, the planting, reducing the lawn area, current lawn area by about 60%. So it's a pretty significant decrease. There's also a finger, you can see where it juts in, yeah, right there, that we're giving back to the wetland area. It's about 900 square feet. The increased terrace bump out space is about a little over 600 square feet. So in my eyes, I just kind of see that offsetting a little bit.
Okay.
The The deer are a concern. They have a recently installed sound system that they've had some success with. It's a clicking noise, and they have these stations set up around the site. And it has kept the deer away from a lot of rose bushes and other things that are just usually decimated. Also, typically in deer-sensitive areas, we have the newly installed planting immediately treated with a deer repellent, Bob-X or similar, and that can be reapplied, I think they suggest every 10 to 14 days for a newly installed material, so that would be definitely something we would do. The boulder demarcations, we're willing to do whatever meets the agency's approval as far as the boulder demarcations. Bob had mentioned upping the size of the boulders to maybe 24 inches or larger and tightening the spacing. We're willing to do whatever the agency suggests on that.
Okay. Good. Okay, are there any agency questions for the applicant regarding this plan?
I have a question for Bob.
Sure.
Bob, relative to your special conditions, I notice you're not using the new bond based on planting plan condition.
Right.
Because?
Well, if we must use it, I can use it. I thought that the bond amount was a surrogate for the plantings, and that the special condition 3 says the bond, meaning the whole bond, will not be released until the 2-year establishment period, and 80% survival rate is completed.
Right. Now, the reason I asked is because you said this was an extensive planting plan now, which strikes me as being more than the $4,000 bond you're asking for.
Okay.
So I think we need to be consistent. Either we do include that in all, or we don't. So I would suggest we include what has become the standard bond based on planting plan cost.
Well, did we agree that's going to be the template?
Well, we
Or
should.
that was a discussion?
Yeah, my understanding was we hadn't come to a conclusion on that as of the last meeting, unless it was more if it was a cease and correct order type of situation.
Yeah.
I agree, I don't think we voted to.
No,
make
we
that.
didn't vote to make it consistent, but I believe we've already used it tonight on cease and correct issues. So we need to be consistent one way or the other.
Right.
My takeaway from Tuesday night was that the agency was interested in having the bond reflect what was going on the site, but was not fully on board with the concept of retailed installed cost of plantings and storm drainage features and other things, and that had looked to staff to have a bond that reflects the complexity. I would say 4,000 probably won't cover this. I would, with regards to kind of setting the framework for that, of this lovely and extensive planting plan, how much does the agency feel really has to be done to compensate for the terrace and the bump out? And then perhaps the bonded portion might reflect that, or we get the bond estimate and the agency might give guidance on not to exceed $10,000 or 50% of the cost or 60% or some level of motivation. We've already established if this thing should fail totally, that we're going to court to enforce, we're not pulling bonds and doing plantings. So that there is a number less than full retailed installed that would be sufficient, because when was the last time a planting plan outright fully failed?
Right.
So, I would think probably something in the 50% range would be reasonable.
I guess my feeling would be something closer to a $10,000 mark, given the extensive nature of the planting on this. I'm not sure how the rest of the agency feels on that. or it can be something that's based, that's based upon what the staff recommends after they receive a retail installed estimate of the planting plan.
We just don't have an agreed process.
Right.
The numbers we're coming up with can be seen as arbitrary, and that's not good. So.
I don't think they're arbitrary at all. I think Pat just summarized it pretty comprehensively. It's really going to be based on an application-by-application basis until maybe we meet again and do come up with a template. But I think 10,000 is a bit excessive for the bump out in this particular planting plan. I think there's a highly motivated owner, by the way. The whole purpose of this application is to create, that type of environment. So I'm comfortable leaving it to the discretion of staff with an understanding that it's commensurate to the project. And if we have real strong feelings on a case-by-case basis, as is evident with this application, then we can give guidance.
When you say commensurate with the process, with the project, what are the metrics you're looking at to come up with that number?
So if retail install pricing is generally runs about 2.5 times wholesale. I don't know if that gives you any, so if you want the wholesale cost of a planting plan, that's something that's tangible and replicable. If you want to go 50% of it, I think that we do run into some trouble when we say, well, it looks like it should be about 8,000, or 10,000 feels like a lot, or that as staff person, I would have a hard time understanding how to implement that consistently. The agency can evolve, so we can say, okay, let's give 50% a try, or let's give wholesale a try, and see how that works for the next few months and see what that produces. Is it getting us to where we want it to be?
I would go with wholesale for now, and also back into the cease and corrects at retail. So for a standard kind of application like this, where there's no cease and correct, we go with the wholesale price, and where there's a cease and correct, we go with the retail price.
Punitive.
Okay.
No, it's not punitive.
No, it's just, it
reflects the fact that
it may not happen, and we may need to step in to do it.
So.
But what percentage of wholesale would you, 100% of wholesale?
I'd start with 100% of wholesale.
It's a 2.5 times
If that
less
turns
than-
out to be egregious, then the applicant can come back and say, wait a minute, that's just too much.
The applicant always has that ability.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I would, coming off of comment made earlier, I think the plantings that we need to price are the ones below the retaining wall, all these plantings. This stuff.
Yeah, that to me would, that's
landscaping.
accessory landscape.
Yeah, well, that I would leave to staff's judgment as to which are the germane plantings and which are the additional nice-to-have plantings that we're not concerned about.
Right.
Yes.
Because if, the deer repellent doesn't get applied, and all of a sudden you lose half your plantings, we need to be able to go back and have those reinstalled. Or, I'm assuming that the deer repellent that is used, and maybe this is more of a question for staff, has no potential harmful effects to wetlands?
Not that I've ever heard of.
Okay.
It's putrid egg and other gross Tabasco and sorts of things.
Okay.
Not Tabasco brand, per se.
Got it. Okay. Are there any other agency questions? Comments? Any public questions or comments on this application? No? You look like you're poised to make a motion.
I would make a motion to approve with the conditions that Bob has suggested, plus an additional clause based on the wholesale value of the bond. The wholesale value of the applicable plantings to increase the bond amount. That's inartfully stated, but
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Yep.
Thank you.
Are you and Dave?
Thank you very
What's
much.
that? Oh, okay. Norma is opposed to that. Okay. Next up.
I guess we should have asked for discussion. Change my vote negative.
2015. Next application, 2015-142, 25 Moreland Road, Redness and Mead, for Justin and Mary Lou Hillenbrand, for demolition and construction of a new single-family residence.
What kind of bump?
It was black and white, shiny thing about 40.
Okay, the agency in 2013 issued a permit for some extensive site alterations at 25 Moreland Road. That permit has never been activated. Now the property owners, the same property owners, have decided they want to change the improvements they want to do. Let me just, excuse me, did you happen to get the comparison plan? It's called compare, I think it's called comparison plan. All right, in your
I have it on a thumb drive if you want me to, that the door range can put it up.
In your packet, there was a rendered plan that had side-by-side, maybe, Dave, do you have a, can you put it on the easel? Here. So, Mr. Ginter is putting the paper copy on the easel, but you all have it in your packets. And, you know, the residential additions previously proposed were pretty extensive. They also had a guest house, sort of a gatehouse proposed. And, you know, the extent of activities was pretty similar to what they're proposing now. Now they've decided they'd rather build a new house. So, and they don't want to build the gatehouse. They are going to be using more low-impact development drainage features than previously proposed. They are going to demolish the existing pool and want to build a new pool behind the house in that location that flashed right there. And it's, you know, all of these changes actually have come with what amounts to a better drainage design, in my opinion. It's going to be reducing peak runoff rates over existing conditions through between the 25 and 100-year storms, and the peak volumes would be reduced beyond the required one-year storm event. The DPW has reviewed the drainage design and found it to be acceptable. I state in the staff report that this comparison exhibit that you have before you on the chart here shows that the extent of activities don't really expand at all toward the wetland beyond what was previously approved. I would note also that the landscaping plan with this current application is more extensive in the important area to the south of the house, the south of the pool retaining wall, and that it's you know, it's things have in a way have gotten better over time, which we don't always see. Now, staff did mention to the applicant's agent that this demarcation feature, which is the same demarcation as shown on the prior approved plan, again, is about 40 feet from the wetland, kind of follows the shape of the wetland. And the question was, aren't there more opportunities to improve this area between the demarcation feature and the retaining wall, maybe moving the demarcation feature further from the wetland in spots? And I've asked the applicant to consider what alternatives work for their clients in this case and address the agency about this. Let's see. I guess that's about it. I'd wait to hear what Mr. Ginter has to say about that point, but I do recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. David Ginter from Redness and Mead, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me tonight is Corey Jorgensen from Wesley Stouts Associates, the landscape architect, to be able to address any questions relating to the landscaping. One item I'd like to note before we really get going here that I don't believe was included on, at least certainly it wasn't included on my site plans, was a slight oversight on my part. Pool equipment was not located, I don't believe, on the landscape architect's plan either. I could be mistaken, but we have shown just to the south of the proposed retaining wall, on the lower side of the retaining wall is where the pool equipment wants to go. So, correct. Yep. So again, I apologize for not having that on our site plans as part of this originally. We have reviewed engineering comments and have no issues with any of the items addressed in there. One of the comments that might affect your review and approval of this tonight had to do with the rain garden, the western side of the property. Mr. Marucci noted that in our calculations, one of the elevations was a little too close to the mottling. We've reviewed the calculations, and the size of the rain garden does not change. We will adjust the soil depth a little bit to accommodate it, but the footprint does not change. So if there was any concerns about that, we have no issues with it. We did receive Health Department approval today. The permit to construct will be issued once the contractor has been selected and goes in and pulls the permit, but written approval was issued today for us. Regarding the boulder demarcation feature, Corey will be passing out 11 by 17s for you of the plan that's in front of you here. What we have done in response to Mr. Clause's comments is we have pulled the demarcation wall back to be in line with the deer fencing from approximately the midpoint of the half wall, the half circle wall here behind the pool structure, to the west. So it's been moved inland approximately 10 to 15 feet from what was previously proposed. Additionally, we have taken an opportunity to look at the landscaping in the area again, and there was a few areas that we thought might be a little light or lacking in some of the shrubs. So we've added an additional 15 shrubs to the plan, as well as some additional ground cover, approximately 250 grasses and ferns and things like that in this southern buffer area to enhance the buffer in response to Mr. Clause's comments. I guess with that, I really have no further comments except for, as mentioned earlier today, with one of the special conditions regarding the filing of the Mylar on the land records. We would just ask that we work with staff to not have to file the Mylar as-built drawing on the land records, but outside of that, I have no other comments or concerns with any of the special conditions or general conditions written in the staff report.
Do I understand correctly, the shrubs are being proposed behind the deer fence?
Yes, on the outside of the deer fence.
On the outside. I would imagine that your client is making a pretty significant investment in the plants, and perhaps the deer fence should go behind them to better help protect them. Yeah, it's a very expensive buffet otherwise.
We'd have no problem moving the deer fence as long as the agency doesn't mind it moving a little bit closer to the wetlands.
And can you explain to me a bit about your rationale for what's going on behind this planting plan?
I'll let Corey Jorgensen answer that.
Thank you.
Corey Jorgensen, Wesley Stout Associates, landscape architects. Specifically, where were you looking?
On the plan here, there's this line, which is that meant to be, I'm not sure what its significance is, but the plantings seem to go between that line and the deer fence.
That line was the original demarcation line.
Okay.
It was the 35-foot, approximately 35 feet from the wetlands. And that's where the demarcation
this
line
is
originally was.
All lawn in here, intimate with the trees.
It's not lawn.
It's grass.
It's just natural. There's no lawn down there.
Well,
Herbaceous material?
Special condition 6, I'm recommending that any turf grass to the south of the boulder demarcation be abandoned. So basically, the edge of landscaping is going to end up being, well, not this, but your new edge of landscaping plan that kind of runs up against this wall. So
Yes.
everything to the south, adjacent to the wetland, no lawn.
That's correct. Yes. If you look at the plan, we have a line that delineates the edge of lawn, and that's where Mr. Clausy had pointed out.
And I'm not meaning to be difficult. Can you just explain to me when you use the term lawn, what it is you're envisioning?
Turf grass.
Or so managed?
Managed, mowed. Irrigated.
Irrigated, okay. Because
fertilized.
So when I am speaking about lawn, this area down here, it's not naturally occurring vegetation, it's fescues or rise, or it's unmaintained lawn.
Unmaintained, that is correct.
Yes, maybe that's the difference.
Yes.
Okay. So that's just going to stop being mowed, or is there a plan to supplement it with seed, to give it a jump in a certain direction,
We could certainly
or
do
guide
that.
it?
Yeah, there is not a plan currently to seed it, but we can certainly implement a plan to seed, to give it a jump start, but it will not be maintained. And and we also added a layer next to the lawn for that purpose as well, to give it something, a transition between the lawn and the buffer. So that's why we introduced some grasses and some ferns and some things that can grow along that edge to really delineate it along that maintained lawn.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? No? Are there any public questions or comments on this application? Would someone like to make a motion? No? Okay, I will make a motion. I will make a motion to approve the plan with the revised boulder demarcation feature as dated today, I guess. Landscape Plan LP-1.0A. And also with the condition of relocating the deer fence to the outside perimeter of the planting plan. Is there a second?
Yes, I will
Okay.
second it.
Thank you. Is there all in agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, 2015-1, actually, no, did we just do that? We just did that. That was Hill and Brand, right? Okay. 2015-144, 613 Riversville Road /100 North Portchuck Road for National Audubon Society for dredging of pond and gazebo 15 feet from wetlands.
Portchuck and John Street, jeez. Oh, I'm just going to read off of this because I can't see. John Street and then Riversville Road to the south, to the west. This pond was dredged 1999, if I remember correctly, and it is time to revisit this project again. I handed out to you some revised maps, additional information with regards to handling the spoils and the close-up of the pond area. Can I go to the next one? There's that one. Can I get this one? Okay. Okay. There we go. This is the plan that was actually approved back in 1999, and Audubon is looking simply to reestablish what was there with some exceptions. They are proposing a gazebo up just on the other side of the trail that runs around the perimeter of the pond. The gazebo would be set on sonotubes to compensate for the slope that drops down behind it. The gazebo would be, of course, a resting location for people who are using the trail, but would also serve as a teaching pavilion, especially helpful in the event of inclement weather. There are a series of boardwalks that are just run along the perimeter of the pond that allow visitors to get up close to what is in the pond. The day I was out there was a couple of young boys who were thrilled to be nose to nose with the frogs. Those boardwalks are going to be, the existing boardwalks will be removed and or rebuilt. They need to be a bit wider. Right now, only one-way traffic is passable. And then over here, there'll be another section which would allow students to line up in one controllable location so that we don't lose any. The boardwalks, albeit in the resource, immediately adjacent to the resource, any sort of intrusion or impact that comes from that, in my mind, is well worth it in tenfold. For every person that can get close to the resource and gain an appreciation for it, that person has a much more likely mindset to protect something elsewhere in the future. So that the education associated with these boardwalks, I think, make this pond a situation that would be viewed differently than other applications, perhaps. Next one. So the pond spoils, which amount to about 250 cubic yards of material, are donated to the pond via a stream that comes from the north portion of the property. I don't know who's all familiar with it out there. Through the orchards, there's some erosion that contributes, and then just natural accumulation of sediment. The pond doesn't have a regular sort of outflow, meaning it's not in a continual stream. So the sediment that comes there very effectively settles out, much to the advantage of the down gradient wetland. The pond actually does have an outflow, overflow that winds up in wet areas down here. So the pond is really doing a pretty good job of protecting those areas. The 250 cubic yards will be removed from the pond, deposited within about 60 feet of the edge of the pond in what is now a meadow that's consumed, once-time meadow, now consumed with porcelain berry. Access will come through the existing I'll call it farm-developed portions of the property, so that you'll have no new disturbed areas. The sediment is proposed to sit through the winter to completely dewater, and then to be spread about a foot deep or so in this area that's outlined on the plan that's before you. The silt fence for the initial phase will be particular to the pile of spoils, and then will be reconfigured in the spring to protect the perimeter of the spread spoils. Getting rid of the porcelain berry. Audubon has a pretty significant issue with porcelain berry, so this certainly weighs in among the habitat improvement sort of efforts to restore the meadow, which would be beneficial to more organisms than the porcelain berry. And provided that the S&E is controlled, I don't think there'll be any threat to down gradient wetlands. I have, because the plans are a resubmission of those of 1999, and some drawings that lack perhaps some detail that the agency is more commonly used to seeing. My conditions include the requirement for a member of the staff to meet on site with the contractor prior to the beginning of work, so that we can talk through the details and make sure that we're all interpreting the plans consistently. I don't think it's a difficult project to manage, so I'm not particularly bothered by the level of detail. It's just a matter of having a conversation to be sure we're all on board. So with that and the other conditions outlined in my staff report, I would recommend approval of the project.
Thank you, Pat. Would you like to say anything?
Andy Chapin for Audubon. I agree with Pat. Just one clarification: there is no stream flowing into the pond. It is it's the drainage ditches from various parts of the property that flow into it. It's a man-made structure from the beginning.
Couple of quick questions for you. You're looking to reconstruct boardwalks as part of this project as well? Are they elevated on piers, existing piers already?
They're on posts now. They're elevated, except for the dipping. We're not looking at the picture. On the northeast side of the pond, there is a diagonal that's right along the edge of the pond that is down closer to the water. That's where the kids dip for aquatic life.
Right. So the section, and you're broadening these to a 6-foot width where you can? Is that what I understood from your?
I think most of them actually will probably keep a little bit less than that.
Oh, okay.
Like the latitude to make, where appropriate, access for disabled people, wheelchair access.
Right. So I guess the question I have is, will you be just building out from the existing footings of the boardwalk, or will you be putting in additional footings as well?
We will be, right now they're currently posts pounded into the bottom of the pond.
Okay.
So we would.
So I'm just wondering if you're going to broaden the boardwalk within those existing, using those existing posts, or whether you're going to be setting more footings into the.
When it's, we would probably remove the posts and put in new posts. And if we are widening that area, we'd probably want to widen the post just a bit to make it more stable, you know, so because the kids go on the outside edges.
And then I guess the clarification is this application, Pat, includes the reconstruction and expansion of the boardwalks, not just the dredging.
That's my expectation, yes.
Okay, very good. Those are my
What are
questions.
the material of the posts?
Currently, they're pressure-treated lumber. We're looking at other options right now, but that is what is there now.
Okay. So they are, so they're creosote covered or?
No, they're
are old-
residential grade. They're not the
So
industrial
they're
grade.
treated with arsenic and all those things that are being pounded into the wetland?
Yes.
Or it
They're-
could
they're-
be
they're the
cedar
home-
posts? Okay.
The pressure treated doesn't have the arsenic in it anymore,
Doesn't-
to my knowledge.
Doesn't have it anymore.
That's good. That's good to know.
Black locust will last you decades,
Black
if you can get a
locust
hold of
is a
it.
good material if you can find it.
Yes, I might have a couple sources if you,
We would like that.
Well,
Yes,
if
thank
you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pat and the Norwalk River Trail that she was instrumental in, so she was a very good resource for these types of projects.
We'll take you up on that.
thanks.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for the applicant? No, any public comment or questions? May I have a motion, please?
Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor? Very good, thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is application 2015-145, 69 Vineyard Lane, Rocco v. DeAndrea, for Pamela Farr for construction of proposed residential addition 60 feet from and rain garden and grading within wetlands.
No, that's fine. All right, the actual residential addition that they're proposing to build here is well removed from the wetland down at the bottom of the slope and is going over a flat part of the existing landscape envelope of the residence. The real activity of interest to the agency, I believe, would be the drainage feature associated with the addition, which is a rain garden at the toe of slope. This area is a lawn. The lawn extends into the wetland. The rain garden is going to include some fill in order to get above the groundwater, and some of that fill will basically eliminate about 250 square feet of wetland by filling 20 inches or more on top of the wetland soil. This is an exempt drainage review because the addition is less than 1,000 square feet. The design that Mr. DeAndrea's firm has come up with will infiltrate the additional flow from the new impervious area up through the 10-year storm, which is one of the requirements for a project between 500 and 1,000 square feet of new impervious. So 250 square feet of filled wetland. I recommended in the staff report, which I prepared on October 20th, that an additional 500 square feet of this lawned wetland be restored in recognition of the fill. And on the 21st, a planting plan came in that does just that. Going to be planting along the edge of the watercourse just to the east of the rain garden. I believe I emailed that to everybody. Sorry, I think I attached it to your staff report because it came in after the thing was written, but before the packets went out. Let's see. So, planting the rain garden, the additional plantings, I think that's all basically a benefit to this lawned wetland. And I recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Good evening. The only thing I would add to Bob's summary is that the 250 square feet of wetland is really already a lawn, so we're creating a functional retention area and infiltration basin within that lawn. So we're reclaiming the lawn. And then, as Bob pointed out, we did have the planting plan submitted shortly after the initial staff comments. I did also want to point out that we typically, for as one of the conditions, you wanted a packet of information so that the owner knows what it has to do as far as maintenance. And that's something that we do for the engineering department typically, and it's in accordance with the drainage manual. So that document would be prepared. We call it the long-term maintenance plan that gets filed with all the as-built plans. So that will be submitted to the agency staff at the conclusion of the construction.
It's a question for you, Tony. So what is feeding the rain garden? Is this
we have
surface?
to, yeah, when we increase impervious area by somewhere between the 500 and 1,000, we have to infiltrate that increase from that impervious area. And that's what it's designed to do for the 10-year storm. So it's a volume, given the fact that we have a steep slope between the development area and the wetland. The most appropriate spot seemed to be at the bottom of the hill, where on previous applications you had already approved some activities which included a level spreader. So we're reclaiming the lawn and then infiltrating back any overflow that may occur beyond a 10-year storm through the level spreader. So we're constantly feeding the edge of the shallow portion of the pond.
Okay, are any of the additions below grade?
No, sir.
Okay, so you're not.
They're on the top of the hill, right?
Any
no groundwater effect.
In
no.
any way. Okay. Any further agency questions for Mr. DeAndrea?
Special condition number 3, Robert. Bob. Special condition number 3. It's back to the planting plan.
Right, because they're going into the wetland on this one, I thought it was appropriate. And based on our prior conversation, perhaps the approved wholesale value would be how to phrase that more accurately.
Yeah, I'm actually pointing this out more for Norma, so she can comment on what you would like to comment on and didn't comment on the last time when we talked about this. To me, approved value, it's up to you to approve it. You can approve it at the wholesale, you can approve it at the retail. I don't think we need to specify, in fact.
You don't need to specify?
Well, with the understanding that it's to be the wholesale, I mean, do we need to specify, or can we leave it to staff? That's our question for the group.
If that's the direction to staff, the item, special condition 1, which requires that the submission of a bond, of the estimate of the planting plan for purposes of determining the bond, we would be asking then for the wholesale, the estimate to be the wholesale cost.
Installed.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah.
So is it not I heard a little bit of the prior discussion, so I didn't know where this was going to go, but is it just the cost of the plants or the installation too?
Well, I think the cost of if you have a wholesale number of the plants, is there usually, I guess the question is there a general rule of thumb multiplier of X to get to a retail installed cost?
Retailed installed would be 2.5 times.
Wholesale.
Retail would be 2 times. So you figure half the cost of the plant, half the wholesale cost of the plant would be the cost to install. So if you want a wholesale installed, it'd be 1.5 wholesale.
So if an applicant were to get an estimate from Shemin or Ford or whatever, you're basically obligating that firm to provide the plants, and then you've got a factor or not, or just
No, you're not obligating that firm.
no. Okay, not the firm, but in other words, a legitimate nursery supplier wholesale would be acceptable, and then you're going to apply a factor. It would probably be easier for all of us if you would just decide on what you want as the multiplier. Because it'll go on
Based on
forever.
the 2.5, it's 60%. The wholesale install would be 60%.
Okay.
Of 60%.
Of retail installed, would be wholesale installed.
I don't know that that's.
Yeah.
I think this needs additional discussion.
I agree.
But we need to
Yeah,
get
no, for
Mr.
purposes
Deanna.
of this application, which is why I voted on the last one, I think we can do it on an ad hoc basis with some level of consistency, but, yeah. That's fine with me, as long as we table this for additional discussion.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, so if we can make a decision for tonight, and then what we will do is bring to the agency, using these real-life examples, what the different scenarios are, so that going forward, you have a basis of comparison, how your words translate into dollars.
On this application, you do have a condition where you can seek relief from some of the bond back, but it's after 2 years, so that seems perhaps there's a way in which you can verify that the plants are alive after a year and perhaps give back something, because that's, with the $3,000 bond, then it may be another $5,000 for the plants. So it's a pretty hefty commitment.
Right. So you could have a situation where once the plants are actually physically installed, a bond portion could be
Through a season.
At least through one season. I think that if
Yeah, through
you've
a
committed to,
season.
you bought them, they're in the ground, you last a year, perhaps you can get something, 50% back or something. But-
And then-
But aren't most of these plants, when you purchased and installed them from a reputable source, guaranteed for a year?
I don't know that for sure, perhaps the guy in the back room could answer that question, but
So the issue with that, Elliot, is
Talking about a
if
reputable source.
we can't require
He
them
wasn't
to go
listening
to
anyway,
a
it doesn't
particular
matter.
nursery.
No, I understand that.
So when somebody says, oh, but I'm going to a place that will guarantee them for a year, what if you don't go to that place? Or what if that guarantee doesn't extend to us, or we don't want to,
Yeah, I think
they go
we
out of
just.
business, or
Yeah,
who knows?
I think we should, we'll table the discussion for another time.
What's the bond?
why don't you just increase the bond on this one, and then we can work out the other one.
I think what you said, 60% of retail plus the 3,000. And then we'll go
Okay.
from there.
Okay. Would you like to make a
So what
motion
was that?
on
I didn't hear. 60% of, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Retail.
Retail installed.
Would be the bond?
Yeah.
Plus the three.
Yes, sir. But to establish the planting, it would be 60% of the retail cost of the plant list that was approved.
Yes.
Right, and the installed cost,
Installed cost, 60%
of the installed cost.
installed cost would be the planting bond,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay.
And we will endeavor to make things crystal clear by the next time we meet.
Yeah, let's make sure that Norma's on board with this.
Motion to approve with the amendment to the bond.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I call for discussion.
Okay, I'm sorry. Any discussion on the motion?
No discussion?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Were you in on that one or no? Was that
No, unanimous vote.
unanimous? Okay. Okay, it's a new section. Agent approvals, permits, and orders. Am I to read these into the record?
You do not need to read them into the record as the agenda has been distributed. If the agency has questions on any particular item or would care for any comment for staff,
Okay.
then
Are there any
one of us-
comments or questions for staff on any of the agent approvals, permits, and orders?
No.
No? Okay.
Okay.
No motion is necessary.
And then under applications to be received, if the agency can please make a motion to add application number 15-113 for 723 Lake Avenue.
Okay, Lake Ave. Okay, so,
And you all should have left off your annotated agendas, because that does not have the, that's sent out before our full submission of new applications. So if you're looking at the annotated agenda, you're missing out on the applications to be received.
okay.
Everybody received the fresh agenda at their seat this evening.
Got it. Thank you.
We can share.
So a motion to
Receive applications.
receive applications 1 through 20, with number 20 being application 2015-113-723 Lake Avenue. Is there a second?
Second.
And if I may,
What's the one?
I'm sorry?
Hang on.
One moment.
I would, again, pursuant to our discussion last Tuesday night, that some of these would qualify and our preliminary review as significant impact activities, that perhaps a motion to receive the applications and schedule them for discussion or public hearing at the next meeting as appropriate.
Okay. So moved.
Second.
Bill, seconds. And all in favor?
Here, here.
Okay, very good. Okay, on to the violations. First one we've already dispensed with. So second item is cease and correct order 2015-026 for Walter Raquette, 78 Zacchaeus Mead Lane, unauthorized dredging of a pond and watercourse and removal of vegetation from wetland, watercourse, and upland review areas.
Okay, I'm going to read the record of documents. One is field visit photos taken October 20th, 2015. Contents of application 2007-33, permit 2007-35. Contents of application 2013-52, permit 2013-58. Violation summary and cease and correct letter issued October 21st, 2015. The 2013 GIS map. An email from John Conte of Conte & Conte to the compliance officer dated October 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 26th, 2015. Email from Walter Raquet to John Conte dated October 23rd, 2015. Okay. Staff was alerted to some activity that might be occurring in the wetland on this property. There is currently a permit in place for the construction of a retaining wall, grading, and landscaping that has not been activated to date. On site, staff found that a pond had been excavated in an area that was previously a red maple swamp located on the southern part of the property. The swamp had been drained of water, and dredge material was placed along the edge of the had been excavated and placed along the edge of the newly excavated pond. There was a rowboat located within the pond bed that had a pump located in it, and there's a hose that was extending from the pond down and outflowing out of the watercourse on the southern part of the property and off the property. There were multiple landscaping debris piles that included logs, wood chips, and brush that existed along the wetland and wetland buffer areas. There are also gas cans, a wood chipper, and other work material located within the area. Upon leaving the site, staff spoke with the property owner, who stated that he had some laborers dredge out that pond. And his plan was basically to stock it with fish and to beautify the area. He also stated that he was unaware of the necessity for a permit to do this kind of activity. However, upon further inspection of this property, when returning to the office, staff found that there was previous violations for similar activities in 2007. The first one, it was in January 2007, with the same property owner. Staff found that laborers had removed trees within the wetland buffer. A permit was issued to restore that area. Later in 2007, in December, the watercourse within the swamp had been dredged without authorization again. A permit modification was issued to correct this violation as well. The permit and the permit modification were issued before we actually implemented orders for any kind of violations, so that's why you see that. Staff's recommending maintaining the cease and correct order 2015-26 that was issued by certified mail on October 21st. And a certificate of violation be placed on the land records if a application to correct the violation isn't received. Initially, the deadline was November 19th, but I understand there might be a request to extend that, which would be agreeable to staff. Staff further recommends issuing a municipal citation in the amount of $1,000 per violation. There are multiple violations on the site that include clear cutting of vegetation, excavating within wetlands, filling wetlands, excavating within the stream, and failure to implement erosion controls.
Done? Okay. Welcome.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I have been retained by the homeowner, Mr. Walter Riquet, who is here with me tonight to address the violation. I want to assure the agency that I accepted this project with the full understanding that my role would be to help develop and coordinate a comprehensive restoration effort in full cooperation with the agency. Mr. Riquet also fully supports this position. Our approach will be to put together an expert team of environmental professionals and consultants to address any impacts that may have occurred as a result of this activity. Our goal will be to restore the area to the best extent possible while minimizing any additional disturbance to the area as expediently as possible. With Doreen's permission, to date, we have installed and established soil and erosion controls, including silt fence and hay bales, surrounding the entire work zone to contain the disturbed area so that there's no further downstream siltation while we develop our response plan. In that regard, we would like to request that the application deadline be extended to January 15th to allow us to properly study and map the area and develop our plans. We intend on bringing in environmental consultants. I've spoken to Dr. Clemens to have him evaluate the area and make recommendations. He's eager to work with us on this, and that pretty much summarizes our approach. I will say my last involvement on this project was when we got the permit 2 years ago. Haven't really been involved with it at all until last week when Mr. Riquet called and said, I was just visited by wetland staff and I'd like your help to respond to this. Since that time, I have found him to be completely open and cooperative and willing to do a very full restoration as needed.
Okay.
What's the parameters, John, of the restoration of the pond? I mean,
What will it be?
Yeah, what's the big?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, I have a picture, a big picture of what's there. You've seen pictures. This is a wooded area. Give it to Brian here. It was, to every indication that I can tell, there really has been no heavy equipment in there. It looks like this was done by hand and wheelbarrow. The spoils seem to have been placed just outside as the digging occurred. He actually was planting along the way. There seems to be hundreds of ferns and irises planted. You know, I think Mr. Riquet honestly loves the land and really thought he was doing, you know, some good there and landscaping. You know, I don't think that there is any real ill intent. It's just a little bit overly ambitious without going through the proper channels. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Yeah.
How do you reestablish a swamp?
Well, I'll let you know when I figure that out. I mean,
Okay.
like I said, we're going to, that's the goal, is to reestablish. No. No, that's why I started out by saying I accepted this project with the understanding that we would be developing a restoration plan.
I guess that's what I was.
We're not looking to say, gee, we did this without permission and we want to end up with a home run here. This is going to have to be restored. Now, my understanding in conversations with Mr. Raquet is that there very often is standing water in this location, that there was a semblance of a pond there to some extent already. I will be researching aerial photographs, we'll be doing soil tests, trying to establish what was there. It's surrounded by a beautiful red maple swamp behind it. Looks like there's all sorts of clethra and native plantings. And then as you get towards the uphill portions of the property, it's just kind of the zone between the construction of a house and a lot of fill and boulder walls, and then it just kind of banks down to what was the boundary. I don't know, Dorian, if you want to keep that picture. That was taken this morning, and it, along the back, it shows the silt fence. I will say, they did an excellent job of putting the silt fence in. I went there and described where I wanted it, and immediately they went to work on putting it in place. So there's multiple rows of hay bales. I was going to ask until mid-January to get back to you with our response plan. In my opinion, and I think that the site is relatively well protected at this point as far as any further encroachment. I've also established a meeting with staff for middle of next week. I want to bring them in, walk the site, and just kind of get everybody up to speed as to what we do. I'm not here to buck heads. I want to just do the right thing.
Is bringing Mr. Clemens in, do you think that this was a vernal pool area?
Really don't know, but I'd like his opinion on that. I want to make sure that if there was any activity like that, that we're going to respond to it.
Got it. Okay.
I don't think the previous applications included that, because when we got that permit, I think Bob did review that. Do you recall any vernal pool there? I don't recall that being part of the.
No, that was outside.
Right. Right.
What we were working on.
So I don't think we're dealing with that, but Dr. Clemens doesn't only, deal with that. I think his advice as to how to reestablish that swamp, to answer your question, is probably the best we can get.
Got it. Well, we look forward to seeing your application.
I want to ask.
Sure.
Pat, is this going to qualify as significant impact activity by your judgments?
Without a doubt.
Okay. So this is going to go to public hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted you to have that heads up.
Okay?
Wear your best suit. Okay.
So you want until January, you said, John, to put a planting in?
Yeah. Dr. Clemens is currently in Florida. He's coming back in early November. We're probably going to have a survey team go out and map the extent of it. So I'm going to need some time for that. Hopefully we don't get into any bad weather between now and then. But my thought is that if we can develop the plan, get our application in January, be heard at your February meeting, and then kind of go to work in March.
It's the wettest time of the year.
Well,
In the swamp.
maybe we don't go to work in March, but at least we are ready to. And then again, based on the suggestion or the best thoughts of everybody in place, we'll go to work when it's the
I
right
guess the
time.
point is there isn't much they can do in the meantime, right?
I think it's just a matter of stabilizing and
Yeah.
protecting.
I'd like to say two words. In 2007, I had a gentleman
I'm
come
sorry,
out
could
from...
you state your name
Walter
for the
Raquet,
record?
yeah. In 2007, I had a gentleman come out from the wetlands. I had 3 dead trees that were going to be falling onto my swimming pool area. He said, fine, take them out. It was a verbal. I didn't know. We took them out, and then a neighbor called, and Mr. Posey came and said that I had to have written permission, and then I paid a fine and everything like that. But I didn't drain the area at all. There was nothing. I think I'd like to see the records. There's nothing about draining the area.
No, I didn't say that. There was removal of vegetation, trees within the wetland buffer. And then the second one, I believe, was a dredging of the watercourse.
Of what?
Removal of dredge spoils from the bottom of a watercourse.
I don't know what you...
Dirt, taking dirt out from the bottom.
Sort of like ditching it. It was the the watercourse was cleaned out, whatever year that was, it was.
2007. Yeah,
I have
it
no
was
recollection of
December.
that, and there was no fine or anything like that.
No, there was
I
no
just
fine,
have
because
no
we didn't
idea
have a
what that
fine
was about.
in place in those days, plus, but I believe you had to make an application. I think Matt Pop came up with a land restoration plan. Kate
Oh, yeah,
Throckmorton was
no, we did a
involved.
restoration, we did all the
Yes.
plantings. yeah.
Yes, yes,
So-
no, but that was what she's describing, that instance.
All right, okay.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Conti? Okay, you have a motion?
Well, just one question for Doreen, because I wasn't clear. This issuance of a municipal citation in the amount of 1,000, but I think you then said per citation, and you rattled off maybe
Right,
4 or 5.
yes, there were 5
so-
additional.
So it's really in the amount of $5,000.
That is what was seen to have occurred on site. It's ultimately up to the agency
So-
to make a
okay, so-
determination on the balance of that municipal fine.
It should read, the issuance of a municipal citation in the amount of $1,000 per
Right.
citation.
That's correct.
Finally agreed upon.
Did I see that your staff report said if an application is not filed, or are you now recommending a fine regardless?
The municipal fine would be regardless in this case.
Yes. I guess I would make a motion to maintain the cease and correct order, but changing the date from November 15th to January 15th, is that correct? And then modifying the last sentence to indicate the municipal citation is in the amount of $1,000 per citation.
Okay. Is there a second?
Would that clarify the number of citations at this point?
I think that'd be
Yeah.
as determined by staff.
No, you
Or
can't
is
give
that-
staff that.
Yep.
Well, this goes to
We had 5. We're going out to the property again at the end of the week. We can reevaluate that. Currently, though, we've estimated about 5 different violations.
Right. In the past, staff has contacted me directly to get approval for issuing fines in these issues, for these issues. So I assume that will be the process that you'll take, based upon what you find.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense? We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Oh, hey, Jay. Oh, hey. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.